presidential race. As you can see, at least back in 2016, you have Robredo getting a huge chunk, at least, of the Visayas and even the Mindanao votes. And that, in a way, at least so far, with the votes that we have received, as you can see right here, there's been a bit of a flip here when it comes to certain parts here of Visayas and then largely of Mindanao. Let's try to focus first here on the 2022 map. As you can see right here, if back in 2016, Vice President Leni Robredo was able to secure Tarlac, that's definitely not the case this time around, at least so far, based on the data that we have. Let's try to take a quick check here at how Tarlac is performing so far. You have Bongbong Marcos with 309,000 votes, ahead by over 100,000 votes here compared to Vice President Leni Robredo. Another crucial area that we have to check here would have to be the Mindoro Island. Again, you have both in Occidental and Oriental Mindoro, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. leading here compared to what we experienced back in 2016. So let's try to focus first here on Occidental Mindoro. As you can see right now, again, maliit pa yung mga bilang natin. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. 70,000, Leni Robredo 46,000. Who knows, medyo maaga-aga pa yung boto. Let's try to figure out later in the program kung ilan so far yung kailangan pang matransmit in Occidental Mindoro. But again, a very small margin so far here for Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And then, let's try to take a quick peek at what's happening here, at least in Oriental Mindoro. Similar scenario. Medyo maliit lang yung diferensya between Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Leni Robredo. As you can see right here, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. at 130,000, Leni Robredo at 120,000. Now, of course, Mindanao, like what I was saying earlier, again, we have to consider here, during this time, they had Alan Peter Cayetano in the race. And that was at least during the period na katandem ni Cayetano si Duterte. And you have Cayetano somehow dividing the votes here for the vice presidency during that time. But this time around, again, Mindanao looking pretty much like an island set for Bongbong Marcos.
Yeah, and then added to that, hindi lang sa now Bongbong Marcos has Duterte on his side. So Mindanao, very, very clearly, Robredo losing a lot of ground over there in Mindanao, particularly northern and central Mindanao. You have a few shades there, right at the bottom there, that is neither...
You wanna find out?
Oh,
kung
di ba?
Sino yan?
Sino yan?
Would you guess it's going to be for Robredo?
No, I would guess that tail number, that is not a number for Robredo.
Yeah. Sarangani this time again, of course, as expected, that's going to be, at least so far, for Manny Pacquiao at 58,000 votes. A little ahead, of course, compared to Bongbong Marcos and Leni Robredo with only 5,000 votes in Sarangani, his hometown, of course, of Manny Pacquiao. And then, of course, let's also take a look at our most vote-rich province, Cebu. Back in 2016, let's try to take a look at the figures during that time. Again, Leni Robredo with 737,000.
This is 2016. Ulitin lang natin, ha? This is 2016. Baka nalilito yung mga tao. 2016 po to.
Exactly. Ahead siya by 500,000 votes kay Bongbong Marcos during that period. But this time, again, you have Bongbong Marcos leading in Cebu. Again, after receiving, of course, the endorsement of the ruling party, One Cebu, so you can see now, Bongbong Marcos ahead. Nagbaliktad na. Siya naman ahead by 500,000 votes compared to Leni Robredo.
Okay.
Okay, again, as you can see right here, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. so far as of 9:10 p.m. with 57% of the votes already in. Bongbong Marcos up by 18.9 million votes, followed by Leni Robredo. Again, the others trailing far behind. Manny Pacquiao with just 1.6 million. Isko Moreno at 1.2, and then Lacson at 607,000 votes.
Partner, let me just qualify what I said a while ago about this being shocking. While we were seeing the same trends in the surveys, medyo nagulat ako, no, because of how the colors change. Like, particularly in Mindanao, we see the whole of Mindanao now in red, and also yung maliit na butas na yun dun sa Luzon, yung Tarlac. Question is, no, what contributed? Because I know the Vice President was also getting some endorsements in Mindanao. Medyo masipag din siya sa pagpunta niya doon. But she wasn't able to turn it into votes.
Well, shifting alliances. You had different alliances in 2016, very different from 2022. I mean, the most obvious one there would be pairing up with Sara Duterte on the part of Mr. Marcos. So that's how it goes.
Tsaka sa Mindanao, I mean, let's recall, tama yung sinabi mo, no? Sa BARMM in particular, Leni Robredo picked up some crucial endorsements, but let's also remember the character of the politics there. It is never dominated by just one clan. You have a number of you have a number of families, a number of clans, warlords, whatever you want to call them, but there are a number of groups there within each locality. So when you get an endorsement there, you also have to factor in who else is endorsing on the other side of the other provinces. In the meantime, Jess, meron din tayong senatorial results. Maybe you can take us through there, an update on who's leading in the senatorial races.
Okay, so far as you can see right here, Robin Padilla leading the pack here with 15.5 million votes, followed by Lauren Legarda also with 15 million votes. Also part of the top 6, you have Idol Rafi Tulfo with 14.4 million, followed in the 4th spot by Win Gatchalian with 12.8 million votes, and then you also have Jesus Escudero with 12.8 million, and then lastly in the top 6 you have Mark Villar also with 11.9, and then at the bottom half of our top 12 you have Alan Peter Cayetano, you have Joel Villanueva, Mig Subiri, and then Risa Hontiveros, so far at least the lone senator of Vice President Leni Robredo, who's part of the top 12. She has 9.8 million votes, followed by JB Ejercito with 9.7, and then his brother Jingo Estrada with 9 million votes.
We'll get into what all of that might mean, but I think it's fair to point out Risa Hontiveros, the only one from the Leni camp so far in the Magic 12. Nandun pa siya, medyo namimiligro pa. If we go by past elections, mga
normally it's
9,
the 8 to 12.
10, 11, 12, 13, yan yung mga nag-aagawan pa. So, but Risa Hontiveros from the Leni Robredo camp so far, but we also have Jojo Binay at 14.
And then to follow, actually Herbert Bautista is also at 8.1 million votes. So medyo malapit-lapit pa yan. Binay, again, like what you mentioned, also at 8 million votes. And then Dibo Chodoro and Guillermo Eleazar. Most probably, these are some of the senators, at least so far, with 0.5% of the votes already in. Mukhang ito yung may chance pang sumabit doon sa ating Magic 12.
Okay. Sige, let's bring in our reporter, Judy Baiza. I think meron pa tayong mga insights dyan sa elections. In particular, the camp of presidential frontrunner Bongbong Marcos, in the meantime, is vowing to remain vigilant. They're not taking anything for granted. They would be the first to say these are all still partial. But let's give this over to mobile journalist Julie Baiza, joining us live from the Marcos headquarters in Mandaluyong. Julie.
Roby, Gretchen, kung nakikita nyo sa likod ko, marami na dito itong mga taga-suporta ni Presidential Candidate Bongbong Marcos. Kanina kumakanta sila ng bagong lipunan, sumisigaw ng landslide, sumisigaw ng hindi kabibayad. Merong iba dito nagmula pa sa Cavite, bagamat hindi pa daw sigurado sa magiging resulta ng eleksyon kanina ay bumiyahe na sila papunta dito kasi confident sila. Meron din nung nakitang lamang na ay nagpunta sila galing sa trabaho mula sa Makati. At itong isang grupo na to, sila yung nauna dito at unang nagwawagayway ng bandila ng Pilipinas, may dalang placard at nagdiriwang na as of this moment.
Julie, kanina meron tayong mga konting problema pagdating sa VCMs, ano? And they're saying that they are still remaining vigilant. Ano bang ibig sabihin nun at ano ba yung binabantayan itong kampo ni Bongbong Marcos?
Kanina, huli natin nakausap si Atty. Vic Rodriguez, ang sabi niya, complacent daw sila. At bagamat yung tinanong namin yung level of confidence sila, hopefully daw during the canvassing maging in favor kay BBM yung resulta. Kasi may mga binanggit sila or may claim ang kampo kanina na incorrect result. Kung saan merong sinasabi na bumoto for BBM pero ang lumabas sa resibo ay si VP yung binoto. Kaya ang sabi nila, meron silang ginawang kaukulang aksyon tungkol dyan. Hindi lang in-elaborate ni Atty. Vic kung ano yung aksyon na ginawa nila. At hindi pa rin daw nila sigurado kung gaano kalawak yung glitches or incorrect results na piniklaim nila.
We have to qualify that, partner, kanina nakita ko kausap nila Ed, si Commissioner Garcia ng COMELEC, and he's stressing they will of course take everything seriously. But as they were checking things as people, a lot of us were seeing on social media, they were trying to match this up against official results, official reports to the COMELEC, and not just to the COMELEC, to the PPCRV and so on, while acknowledging, for example, that particular incident in Lanao. Yung they are looking into that, but most of what we're being reported on social media, sabi nila, so far wala namang formal
Meron din kasi
complaint.
yun nga, may fake news din na kumakalat. That's why we were calling on people to actually take videos, take photos, and file these as evidence.
Okay.
In the meantime, balik tayo. Jess, what else can we see? In particular, saan ba nanggagaling yung mga boto?
Okay, this time, alimbawa, mag-focus muna tayo kay Bongbong Marcos. Let's try to first take a look at where most of his votes are coming in. Okay, supposedly, I was to tell you guys, na pag, at least for this particular function of the LED screen, areas wherein his part is the brightest, that means doon pinakamalaki yung boto niya. But as you can see right here, mukhang evenly based. Mukhang yung pagka-gradient is that it would show talaga na at least across all areas, medyo may kataasan yung kanyang boto. This time around, let's try to take, parang ganun din no?
Medyo, hindi rin natin makita pa, no?
Mukhang kailangan pa natin i-update this particular part of our touch screen. But so far, let's try to take a peek at our vice presidential race. Let's go to our heat map right here. Pretty much in green, the entire country here. Again, with Sara Duterte at 19.7 million votes, followed by Kiko Pangilinan, a far second with only 6 million votes. So far, Kiko Pangilinan has secured Camarines Norte, Camarines Sur. Also, you have here Albay and Catanduanes. However, in the Visayas, despite the fact that you have Leni Robredo securing portions of Western Visayas, so far, nasa-secure pa lang ni Kiko Pangilinan would have to be Iloilo, as you can see right here. With 20% of the votes, Kiko Pangilinan at 338,000 compared to Sara Duterte's 291,000 votes.
Partner, we have about 61.05% now of votes, and Ferdinand Marcos Jr. still with a comfortable lead at 20 million. 20 million na po yung boto na nababasa natin dito. And the second frontrunner, Leni Robredo at 9 million. Kanina nakausap natin, no? Ang kampo ni Bongbong Marcos. Now, we head on over to the camp of Leni Robredo, Vice President Leni Robredo. We have with us Jacob Lazaro on the line, who is right there, in the camp of the Vice President. Jacob?
Hi, Gretchen. Hi, Roby.
Jacob, how's the mood over there?
Well, in contrast with Judy Biza's atmosphere, where there's supporters all around her and it's bright, as you can see here, it's almost just me outside the headquarters of VP. And if we go inside, most of the people there is really quiet. In expected yet at least shocked of the results that they're seeing. Earlier in a press conference with Attorney Macalintal, he said that he still has hope and that the morale of the camp before the partial unofficial counting came in, he said the morale of the camp is still high and that they still have hope. But after seeing the partial unofficial counting, now things are becoming quiet. Most of the people in the camp just are speaking or like whispering with each other about the possibility that the next 50% could bring a victory for VP Robredo. But another notable thing Attorney Macalintal said was that in his 38 years of being a lawyer, he said he still believes in miracles. And based on the number that we're seeing, it looks like that's what they're going to need, a miracle.
Okay.
All right, maraming salamat, Jacob Lazaro. And at this point, partner, we have 60% of the results coming in. And just for those who are tuning in to their first ever elections coverage, how much can things change in the next 40%, and when do we expect possibly 100% or about 90% of the votes?
Well, let's say this is. I think it's safe to call this a trend at this point, with more than 50% of the of the votes in. For perspective also, kasi sanay kasi tayo sa close fight di ba? But for perspective, if this were in the past elections where everybody's just going for plurality, the reality is this would have won the elections already when people, at the time when people were expecting 30% of the vote and so on. At this point, with more than, actually 60% na pala, and Bongbong Marcos performing basically as the surveys had predicted. If this holds, I mean, parang it's really quite unimaginable. It's the same thing that the pollsters were telling us, di ba? Anything is possible, but at the same time, is it probable? We have to start managing people's expectations, I think. In fact, I mean, Mon, I wanted to bring you in. Something that Jacob said. He said, on the one hand, expected, on the other hand, stunning. I mean, that's something I think to be said for this, for what's turning out to be a very clear trend, di ba? Wherein the surveys did start telling us you may start to expect a return of the Marcos government, of a Marcos to the presidency. Notwithstanding the surveys, the reality is it's still a stunning prospect, di ba? When you take this entire 36-year narrative from people power, now we are in fact looking at the likelihood of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. picking up from where Ferdinand Marcos Sr. left off.
Well, there's a bit of a historical circle going on here. If you recall, 2022 is the 50th anniversary of the declaration of martial law. So there is a kind of symmetry here. I don't know if you would like the symmetry, but there's this kind of circle that's going around. It's right to say, that people expected because the polls were saying it. Although, for a while we had this discussion about social media metrics painting a very different picture, in fact, the reverse. So that kind of muddled it for a while, and people were wondering, okay, what's going to happen really? But then on the other hand, I'm personally surprised how rapidly the results have come in.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've seen the results come in this fast. So that's another record-setting experience for Filipinos. So, well, let's see. Let's see how this vote count will come up towards the end. But it looks like the trend has been set.
Yeah. Let's bring in, and this won't be just a conversation between us journalists. We did bring in people to help us understand from different camps. Joining us in tonight's coverage, former presidential spokesperson Edwin Lacerda and political analyst Edmond Tayao, Professor. And Sir Edwin, welcome to our coverage.
Nice to be here, first time.
And thank you for being here. Mr. Lacerda, I'll let you first have your own first insights and take on what seems to be a very clear trend.
Let me just look at the numbers because I'm also having my own count. You're correct that there's 61% of ERs have come in. But of the total number of votes cast, that's about 51.11%. You mentioned a while ago in your earlier program that to reach normal is 39%. No? At 39%, Bongbong should be hitting 25 million to hit 25 million at 39%. To reach 50%, he has to reach, and we're looking at only at the domestic votes, so we're not counting the overseas votes. So we're looking at the universe of 65.7 million. So to reach 50%, Bongbong should hit 32 million, over 32 million. And that, if he hits 32 million, then that's over.
Okay.
So we're pretty close, 20 million. He's close to the 39% mark. It's about 5 million.
But from yung heat map namin, it's not quite generating the fine granularity that we were hoping to get. But from what you're seeing of the votes that we're still waiting for, meron ba kayong pinangahawakan dyan? Are there any particular regions where you expect numbers to come in that, might just make it a little bit more interesting?
Well, you're looking at, for instance, Baluarte, which is Region 5, Bicol. Then you're looking at Region 6, Western Visayas. And then you're looking also, despite the fact that in Calabarzon, Lenny went down by 18 points in the last pulse survey, but that survey was taken because Marcos really devoted time in Calabarzon. And the time when Pulse took the survey, around April 16 to 21, buhos talaga si Bongbong doon. Subsequent to that, in April 26 to 30, si Lenny naman ang bumuhos doon.
Yes.
So, we're not quite bothered. I think her numbers in Calabarzon will pick up. And also in NCR, it would also pick up because the last numbers that we're looking at, the last numbers of pulsation shows around 26%. So hopefully it will go up.
I noticed you said Calabarzon, not necessarily Region 4. There's a difference between
That's
4A
Region
and
4A.
4B.
Calabarzon is Region 4A.
Ah.
And Mimaropa is Region 4B.
Ah.
Maganda rin yung ano niya, sa pick-up niya sa Region 4B because she's getting the votes from ISCO.
Okay.
And but in terms of Region 4A, bumuho si Lenny in the last few days of April. So the survey didn't capture the push of Lenny in Calabarzon. So
Okay.
hopefully we're seeing some numbers there. And some parts in Mindanao, like for instance Zamboanga, and hopefully she'll get some votes despite the numbers in BARM, the endorsement of Murad. Basically, command votes, in our experience, would only contribute around 5% to the market votes. So hopefully those numbers will be pumasok yung mga command votes na pinangako kay Lenny. But
Professor Edmund Tayo, your insights?
Well, after so many discussions we've had, no, I think as you've already mentioned, the surveys have been pretty consistent. But yun na nga, medyo too early. Let's wait for the count to reach about 70% at least. No? The trend is already there. But I've been looking at the source of votes. May mga 70% na, no, including the areas in Calabarzon. No? So I think the crucial point there also is that, even if Region 6 has been secured, no, by VP Lenny, yung Region 7 talaga doon siguro na-neutralize as far as Visayas is concerned. No? So let's see still. I'd like to suspend judgment still up to, say, 65-70%.
Okay.
We're talking about the two front runners now, but I'd like to also bring into the discussion two other candidates who seemingly we're not seeing their colors on that map. Manny Pacquiao was expected to do well in Mindanao. Isko Moreno in NCR. What do you think happened when it comes to their campaigns? What did they do wrong to not register strongly in these areas?
Well, marami. No? At the outset, as far as Senator Manny Pacquiao is concerned, I've been also following how he started his campaign. No? The first issue that he picked up is the West Philippine Sea. It's a popular issue, fine. But you're running for office and you have to speak about an issue which can be identified to you, no, by the public. Instead of choosing poverty, for example, or employment or whatever, he started talking about the West Philippine Sea. So I'm not sure whether people actually picked it up or it led to more criticisms, no, than getting more following. And then he followed through with what? A 22-point agenda. It's the first time that I'm going to see a candidate coming up with a 22-point agenda. I mean, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't require explanation anymore. And then you come up with what? 50,000 pesos monthly, what's this, minimum pay? Where are you going to get that? How? No? So, nag-iisip naman yung mga botante kahit papano. As far as Isko Moreno is concerned, I think it's simply the campaign really that fizzled out. No? He showed a pretty good showing at the start, no? But I heard the stories as far as how the campaign was managed, no, at the ground level. Supposedly, when you do scheduling, at least that's what I heard, the scheduling is done at the national campaign headquarters. But how it is exactly going to be handled on the ground should be handled by those in charge on the ground. But that is not the thing that happened. Apparently, there was infighting, and that contributed significantly in the campaign.
Balik naman lang natin, Jess, yung surveys. Binabanggit natin yung surveys. We're also saying basically how it is more or less consistent. But just maybe balik tanawan lang natin what the surveys were based on.
Originally, I really wanted to show you guys, since you were all discussing about the surveys earlier, I wanted to go back to our 8 set of graphics, if our producers can just pull up those charts here, just to give us a better snapshot as to how Lenny Robredo and Ferdinand Marcos Jr. fared back in 2016. and then we compare it to the latest Pulse Asia survey, wherein it would show that at least in the latest Pulse Asia survey, dalawang region lang talaga yung nakuha ni Leni Robredo, and that pretty much corresponds to what we have in our heat map right here. You have Leni Robredo securing only the Bicol region and Western Visayas. Now, again, if our producers can just pull up those charts again, but so far, at least, ayan, exactly, yan eh. So you have here, back in 2016, Robredo securing regions 4A up to region 4B, while of course, as expected, you have Marcos securing NCR, and at the same time, you have the Cordilleras in regions 1 to 3, and then pretty much so on and so forth, and then again, Robredo securing certain parts here of Mindanao. But again, in the latest Pulse Asia survey, it's a totally different picture here. You have Robredo, you have Marcos again, stealing at least regions 4A and 4B. And then, like what I mentioned earlier, Vice President Leni Robredo, at least of all the regions, only securing Region 5 at a whopping 83% compared to Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s 8% here. And again, Western Visayas Region 6 here at 54 and then at 31. And of course, that would bring us here to our heat map right here, and you would see again, that pretty much is also what's happening here. You have Vice President Leni Robredo securing Visayas and at the same time Western Visayas. But also, you have to take note, merong mga ilang parts ng Eastern Visayas na nakukuha ni Leni Robredo so far. We have, of course, Northern and Eastern Samar as well.
Northern Samar kasi si kumuha si Governor Edwin was committed eh. So Northern Samar yun eh. So nakuha, he committed at 22 of, I think 22 of 25 mayors went for Leni also. So there was really a good command vote there in Northern Samar. Eastern Samar was Ben Everdon na pumangako naman. So medyo kaya there's some growth in Eastern Samar.
But if you take that heat map and you take it from the simplest, I mean, geography-based analysis that Filipinos do, which is basically north, south, maybe middle. I mean, does that basically hold na ganun lang? Especially now when you look at how Sara Duterte picks up a lot of votes from the north, and Bongbong Marcos now performs clearly, much better in the south. So basically, the betting of solid north and a solid south, and then sa gitna, maybe dyan pwedeng may makuha si Leni Robredo.
Yan yung talagang sinasabi na north and south na conventionally, it still works. You know, if the idea, by the way, the campaign of Isko Moreno was, pag tumakbo si Sara, tumakbo si Bongbong, siya ang beneficiary. Because, you know, of all the second choice preferences, si Isko was the most favorite because he had wala siya masyadong negative attributes. So that was really the expectation of the Isko camp, that the two of them will run. At that time, Isko was thinking Leni wasn't going to run. So, but fortuitously, GMA was able to convince Sara and Bongbong to run together, avoiding the mistake, by the way, of Danding and Imelda in 1992. Because had Danding not run for president, Imelda would have been the post-EDSA Marcos president first, di ba? But they ambition took over. Unlike here, sanity took over, and therefore there was a coalition of both families.
I think that was December, kung saan bumulusok yung numbers ni Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to 50+% when Sara declared she was running for vice.
In fact, if you're looking at Pulse numbers, sometime in September, Sara was around 24, and Bongbong was lower than that. So, and then Isko and then Leni. So talagang dikit yung laban na yun eh. It would have been like you were saying, dikit yun pag si Sara at saka si Bongbong tumakbo, Isko pumasok, and then bumulusok si Leni, dikit ang laban.
Edwin, I mean, my impression, I'm trying to recall, but my senior memory is getting in the way. But the map seems to coincide with the map of political alliances that were actually forged.
Yeah, true.
By the two candidates. So, in the case of Mr. Marcos and Sara Duterte, the map reflects their respective connections. Is that correct? Is my memory serving me right?
You know, you're correct, because prior to the coalition of Sara and Bongbong, Sara was weak in the north.
Yeah.
So that's why there's a marriage of, it was
a convergence.
The convergence of interests. And so they benefited, it was of mutual benefit to each other. Bongbong benefited from the south, And then Sara benefited from the north. And so, given that Bicol was one region devoted to Leni, and Western Visayas, by the way, if you're looking at the Western Visayas numbers of Leni at 55, that's not Baluarte numbers. If you're Baluarte kasi, you're looking at 75 and above.
Yeah.
So,
I think if you look at the heat map that Jess pulled up again, what's also crucial, kasi very glaring, di ba? Yung sa 2016, yung mga dating yellow that's now flipped to red. One very clear thing that people ought to remember was that in the South, kasi that was, as the title said, that was Marcos versus Robredo.
Correct.
In the South. And Marcos was not a Mindanaoan. But now, in the South, that's really pitched as well as a Robredo versus Duterte.
Yeah.
Di ba? And that explains it. That's it fully. Parang if you just keep it to that headline of Marcos versus Robredo, then you'll miss the story of what happened in Visayas and in Mindanao.
Right.
But you have to remember that Marcos versus Robredo was the story in 2016. And in 2022, when it comes to the South, that's really Marcos versus Duterte versus Robredo.
Well, focusing on Mindanao specifically, it does not seem that the endorsement of Alvarez, of Congressman Alvarez for VP Leni, made a dent. What do you think? We don't have the breakdown yet.
Medyo late na din dumating eh. The endorsement came in late. And not to mention, of course, that from within the same group where former Speaker Alvarez came from, of course, there were some, not only resistance, but I don't know, criticisms as to him moving to another group. But if I may take off from what Sec Edwin was saying earlier, it also confirms the campaign strategy that was employed by the Marcos team. No? Kasi pag tinignan mo nga yung 2016 results, Calabarzon really talaga dominated nila eh. So they looked up more or less, no, which areas were weak areas, no, for Marcos in 2016, and that's where they concentrate. I remember how many times they went to Calabarzon in the campaign. No, so that's pretty consistent. That's why I also looked at regions 6 and 7. Yung region 7, that's a pivotal point eh. Ilang beses din sila nagpunta. That's where the tandem was cooked in the first place. No, so two important points. Yung sinabi ni Mon kanina na yun na nga, the endorsements of local political names have been contributory, but apart from that, the campaign coincided with it.
At saka, by the way, can I just say, Mon, I think I mentioned to you before that ang command votes kasi, may ano yan eh, may bargaining yan eh.
Yeah.
The command votes, sabihin natin may command votes, the local politician would focus more on the local. Yun sigurado may command. And the wards would say, boss, pagbigyan mo na lang kami sa national. We'll carry you on the local para panalo ang mga kandidato mo sa baba. Pero sa taas, hayaan mo na kami mag-decide. May ganun mga compromise, may bargaining yan. So we don't know. It's possible.
So they could be projecting to the national media na ganito, but in the local, iba yung
normally
nangyayari.
ganyan. May mga ganung laro. So that's why we don't know what's in play. But you know, this is also a revenge of the Dutertes on Alvarez because natalo ang mga Duterte in 2019. Hindi sila papayaw ulit sa 2022. Diba? Davao yan.
So ito yung rest back.
Rest back ng mga Duterte.
Okay.
Okay. Just balikan din natin yung update sa senatorial race. I know a lot of people are trying to finish this, and I have some questions as well for our panelists on what they think. Anong takeaway natin? How the Senate is shaping up?
This time around, let me just pull up the chart here very quickly. It's here again, you have Robin Padilla still leading the pack here. Top spot here at 17.2 million votes, followed by Lauren Legarda with 16.5. Also, you have here Idol Rafi Tulfo with 15.9 million votes, followed by Win Gatchalan at the fourth spot here with 14.1. There's also Chis Escudero, not far behind, also with 14.1. And then completing the top 6 would be Mark Villar at 13.1 million votes so far. Also, you have Alan Peter Cayetano, Joel Villanueva, Mig Zubiri, and Risa Ontiveros, part of the top 10. Also, at least part of the top 12. Number 11, JB Ejercito with 10.7 million votes, and then Jinggoy Estrada with 9.9 million votes. Siyempre, isama na rin natin, of course, You have in the 13th to 16th spot here, Herbert Bautista with 8.9 million, Jojo Binay with 8.9 million as well. There's also Gibocho Doro with 8.7 and General Guillermo Elazar with 8 million votes so far.
Right, that's our updates for the senatorial slate. We'll ask questions about that later. But for now, a number of issues actually marred our voters for today. Let's go to our panelist, Danilo Arao, who will tell us more about the malfunctioning of the vote counting machines. Danilo? Professor
Hello,
Danilo, rather.
Yeah, hi, good evening, and thank you for having me here.
Professor, ano po ba ang ating balita ngayon? Kontra Daya, marami po tayong nakitang mga reports on social media when it comes to these vote counting machines. Meron na nagsasabi na simula umaga hanggang gabi, late na, tapos people have been calling for extension of the voting hours. What's the update on that?
Right now, we've published our final assessment of what happened today, and you're right, Gretchen and Roby, that the breakdown of vote counting machines is much worse compared to 2 election cycles ago. So the main problem right now with the breakdown of the vote counting machines is that it has resulted in very long lines, and there are very disappointed voters because they've been deprived the right to vote. We're not jumping to the conclusion that there is already massive disenfranchisement. We have to rely on more empirical data on that. That's why we're closely monitoring the presidential and other races. So the main issue with the conduct of the campaign is that based on our studies, there are mainly problems with the vote counting machine. There are problems with disinformation, with the constant red tagging of certain candidates and certain party list groups, as well as various other traditional forms of cheating like vote buying. So the report on the ground is that it's much worse in terms of the magnitude and the brazenness with which certain rich and powerful people are doing such cheating practices. So that's the situation on the ground based on what we've gathered, Gretchen and Robbie.
Professor, how does this affect the integrity of the results? We're seeing now 60%.
63.7%.
Oo, but we are also having a lot of these reports for the vote counting machines na meron pa nga mga hindi pa nakakaboto, hindi pumapasok. How does this affect the integrity, the accuracy of the results, what we're seeing now on the screen? And gaano kalaki pa yung pagbabago na maaari nating makita rito?
Well, frankly speaking, it puts into question the credibility of the results of the election. I'm not saying that the cheating would be massive enough to change the people's sentiments, but what cannot be denied is that there are voters who have been deprived of their right to vote, although it is no fault of their own. We are strongly disappointed with the COMELEC for not listening to the people, for not being able to extend voting hours. It's a very simple request that really makes sense given that there have been long lines and that people have lined up as early as 6 o'clock and they were able to vote only in the afternoon. Those are the lucky ones, and for the unfortunate ones, they had to stay until late at night to wait for either the vote counting machines to be repaired or to be replaced. So that kind of an atmosphere, Gretchen and Robbie, cannot be the new normal. We cannot just say that just because it happened to a minority of the people, assuming that that is really the case and that it doesn't affect the outcome of the election, we would just let things be. So that's why whoever wins in the elections here is strongly challenged to make the necessary reforms, chief of which would be an investigation of the conduct of the COMELEC and make sure that Smartmatic will be investigated also, and hopefully this will be the last time that it will be involved in the election process. We've had enough of Smartmatic already. We've rejected them as early as 2010, but the COMELEC insisted on having it as an election partner, as a provider of the important component of the election, which is the vote counting machine. But right now, they should be out of the picture altogether given what happened. Just to repeat, Gretchen and Robbie, the breakdown of the vote counting machines is very, very massive. In fact, it happened even at the early hours of the election process, which is very unprecedented.
And we've been seeing sentiments online saying na bakit pa nag-automate tayo? Ano kung ganito din pala yung aberya? And people expecting the COMELEC to be ready. They've claimed that they've tested the machines. Meron na silang parang kumbaga stress test dun sa mga VCM. Yet we're seeing a lot of these problems coming up. 1,900 lamang yung spare that contingency VCMs that they had. And I think a while ago, parang 800 na yata yung bilang ng mga sirang at defective na VCM. And this just raises questions, but medyo yun nga, sabi nga, no, parang doesn't mean that what we're seeing right now and the reports, if it's enough to actually change the results.
And to that point, we'd like to thank Professor Danny Araw again for reminding us. I mean, the issues that still have to be ironed out, not just for these elections, but for the next cycles. In the meantime, we also have on the show Rafi Tulfo, who is now inside, still within the magic 12 of the senatorial race. Rafi, are you there?
Yes, Roby and Gretchen, magandang gabi sa inyo.
Rafi, so far so good sa kampanya. I think if we look at the numbers right now, you are number 3. Kamusta? Tapos na ba ang boxing as far as you're concerned?
I hope so. I'm very happy and very glad. Sabi ko nga sa mga staff ko, sa mga kaibigan ko, nagtatanong, ano bang gusto kong place dyan sa senatorial. Sabi ko, basta pumasok lang ako sa top 12, masaya na ako. So, yan. Binigyan ako ng bonus at number 3 pa talaga. I was expecting na at least 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay lang sa akin. Ginawa ko number 3, praise the Lord.
Okay. Idol, ano masasabi mo? Kasi number 1 si Idol actually, Idol Rafi Tulfo in many surveys. But we're now seeing Robin Padilla at number 1. What can you say about that?
Well, nasa tao naman yan, taong bayan, kung sino talaga ang gusto nilang piliin, iboto. In this case, mas nakararami ang binoboto si Robin Padilla. Congratulations. At si Lauren Legarda, congratulations sa kanilang dalawa. Okay na sa akin mag-number 3. As a matter of fact, nag-usap nga kami ni Lauren Legarda a couple of weeks ago sa isang dinner. Nakakatawa nga, sabi namin dalawa, kahit sinong mag-number 1 sa amin, okay lang. O kahit na hindi mag-number 1 ang isa sa amin, hindi naman namin hangad, hindi namin alam, yung pala magna-number 1, pinag-usapan namin, number 1, when in fact, magna-number 1 pala si Robin Padilla. But anyway, congratulations kay Robin kung gano'n.
May usapan din sila sa mga frontrunner.
Bueno, Rafi, gusto ko lang tanungin, kung palarin ka, if the trends hold at papasok ka sa Senado, ano bang maaasahan ng taong bayan?
Yung sinasabi ko palagi, Robbie, yung proteksyon at karapatan para sa mga magagawa kasi for so many years, for the past 20 years, paulit-ulit na lumalapit sa aking programa yung mga laborers natin na kinukupitan, ninanakawan, inaapi, nilapastangan ng mga mapagsamantalang amo. It has to stop dahil magpapasa tayo ng batas na para maparusahan kriminal ang mga among nagnanakaw sa mga empleyado nila. Kasi sa present setup ngayon, Robbie, kapag ang isang amo hindi nagbigay ng tamang pasweldo, hindi nagbigay ng tamang binipisyo, ang gagawin lang yan, pag-ayusin sila sa DOLE o sa SSS, Pilat Pag-ibig, para ibalik yung pera, and then tapos na. That's only a civil case. Walang criminal doon, liability. Whereas ang sa akin, pa-file ako ng wage step na magkaroon ng criminal liability na pwedeng makulong ang sino mang amo na kumukupit ng sweldo sa kanyang mga gawa. Kasama rin dyan, yung advokasya ko ay para bigyan proteksyon ng ating mga OFWs, tinatawag nating mga bayani.
Okay, Rafi, maraming salamat. Hindi naman po kaila, kapatid namin dito sa TV5 at sa News 5 yang si Rafi Tulfo.
Mayroon ba may pahabol na ako natanong? Kasi kayo po Sir Rafi ay nakilala bilang isang YouTube, diba tawag doon, tagapagtanggol sa
Superstar.
online, diba superstar. Paano po magbabago yung buhay po ninyo? Now that you are a legislator, how different is it going to be? Medyo magto-tone down po ba tayo pagdating sa mga online show natin? Or are you going to be able to blend your work there together with your office in the Senate?
Thank you, Gretchen, sa katanungan yan. Hindi ako magbabago. As a matter of fact, lalo ko pang doblehin ang aking pagtatrabaho. Kasi kung before, I was only doing 100% at the time doon sa effort ko. This time, I'll do it at 200%. Bakit kamo? Kasi this time, sinisweldohan ako ng gobyerno. So, government is the one who's paying for my salary. So, kailangan siguraduhin ko na nasusulit ng gobyerno ng taong bayan yung pinapasweldo sa akin. Siyempre, yung aking YouTube channel, hindi ko pa rin yan bibitiwan dahil diyan ako nakilala at siyempre gusto ko yan maging daan para sa mga subscribers ko para malaman kung ano mga pinanggagawa ko sa Senado at ano mga nangyari sa Senado. They'll be informed through that YouTube channel.
Okay. Idol Rafi, isa na lang huling tanong, and I will use this as an excuse to lead our panel into an exercise dito with Jess. Meron kasi kaming experiment dito trying to anticipate what the Senate will look like and more importantly, how it might behave. So Idol Rafi, isang tanong ko sa iyo, how do you see yourself? Administrasyon ka ba? Opposition? Nasa gitna? However you wanna call it.
Nasa gitna ako. However, Roby, susuportahan ko kung sino yung ialal na Pangulo ng nakararaming Pilipino. I will support that person. However, I will still stay independent. Hindi ako nakatali sa isang partido kasi ang aking loyalty ay sa taong bayan pa rin.
Okay, maraming salamat, Rafi Tulfo. And as I was saying, Sir Edwin and Professor Tayaw, if you direct your attention to the screen with Jess, we have a little experiment here, a little exercise, just trying to build some scenarios on what the Senate will look like with the current, with the people who are currently emerging as likely senators and how they might behave. Jess.
Okay, as you can see right here, again, as the title itself says, ano ang posibleng maging political alignment sa Senado should we at least have a Marcos presidency? So yan, I think we can open this up to our panel kung ano yung magiging insight nila, especially when it comes to our possible winners here in the top 12. Let's start off. Sir Edwin tayo, baka meron ka dyang insight among the possible winners. Medyo i-limit muna natin dito sa at least sa ating mga magiging bagong
Pwedeng umpisahan ko sa diretsuhin na natin yung real question. Sino opposition dyan? Ha? Si Risa.
Okay, clear. Okay, let's put Risa there. Again, administration, swing, and opposition.
Si Alan Cayetano, if you remember how vociferous that fight with Alan Cayetano, with Bongbong Marcos won
2016.
In 2016, and how he's positioned himself now, can you really imagine him in the administration? No.
No. He would be swing for me, but not opposition.
Same, Sir Edwin?
I think there's bad blood between the two. So I think I'd place him in opposition siguro.
Okay, half and half. Maybe safe, iswing muna natin.
Sige.
Do you think?
Si Rafi, sabi ni Rafi ako, I'm not taking anything for granted either. Pero sabi ni Rafi, ano ba, swing yata ang sinabi.
Yes,
Diba?
more or less. The way we take it, no? Medyo may pagka-swing yung sinabi ni Idol Rafi kanina.
But that's it, we close the door with Risa on the opposition side.
Jojo Binay. Is Jojo Binay there?
Jojo Binay is not yet in the Magic 12.
Not yet.
I think he is number 14 so far.
14,
Still has a
yes.
chance.
So far, at least in the faces that we have here, no, medyo kailangan lang nating i-refresh so far kasi ito yung napapakita sa listahan natin. You have the likes of Loren Legarda, Mark Villar, Mig Subiri also, if I'm not mistaken, is at number 9. Pasok yan. Chis Escudero, Robin Padilla, Wing Gatchalian, Jingo Estrada, and JV also. Ano?
And let's not forget the incumbents, ha?
I think Coco will be opposition.
Coco. Of course, Coco. Although kasi medyo malilimit to, baka mag-refresh tayo mamaya pag pinasok natin lahat. So, simulan muna natin siguro dito sa ating possible winners.
I think si Cheese will be swing.
Cheese will be swing.
Yeah, I agree.
Alright. Loren Legarda. Administration.
Yung administration muna, madali yung dalawang Estrada.
Dalawang Estrada. Definitely
Kasi
administration.
close sa mga Marcoses yun eh. Di ba?
Agree? Sir Edmond?
Both? Agree, but with one caveat.
Which is?
The brothers wouldn't necessarily share the same.
Baka sa Pineo.
Between the two of them.
Paano pala? By the way, si Jojo Binay is here. So mukhang inano natin. Let's assume Jojo Binay makes it into the
He'll be swing.
the top.
After all,
top
number
12.
14 siya.
Will be swing or
I
opposition?
would assume he'll be opposition.
Yeah.
Opposition.
Because, tao ni Cory yan. So, may ano yan. May
Yeah.
loyalty.
Joel Villanueva.
Si Joel will be swing. Ngayon pa lang, swing na nga eh. Dati kay Noy yan. Tapos, nag-Duterte, di ba? Parang swing yan.
Ako, I am eager. Pasensya na kayo, Jess. Pero ako, I'm eager about some names dito sa incumbents. So, where would Grace Poe be?
Swing.
Swing. Okay. Pasok natin, sir.
Actually, gusto ko lang kasing hawakan yung Legos.
Ramdam ko nga eh. Kanina ka pa
Gusto ko
nangangati
lang
eh.
maglaro din eh. Oh. But you see, you get the whole point
Gretch,
of the
ikaw,
exercise,
meron kang gusto
diba?
silipin dito?
Right.
Hindi, nag-enjoy na si Roby.
Iwan na natin.
Sermon.
Wala pa ako makikita.
But you see the point of the exercise here, di ba? Parang, when was the last time, by the way, that we had a president and a nakatandem na vice president na parehong nanalo?
GMA.
I think this is
GMA
the
and
first.
GMA,
Noli
di ba?
Castro.
Oh, di ba? That was the last time. And since then, we've had a lot of problems with checks and balances in government, Congress, everybody's in the supermajority, and so on. So that's always been a real question. Do we have a real opposition?
Theoretically, kasi...
Like, especially with if it holds, you have the first majority president as well. Very powerful, along with a very popular Duterte pa rin.
Alam mo, normally, Roby, we've always, I was in government, we were talking to President Pinoy. Ang sabi niya sa amin, alam mo, ang Senado, ang Congress, hawak ng Presidente yan. Ang Senado, you have 24 independent republics.
Congress, you mean the House of
The House,
Representatives?
sorry, the House of Representatives, hawak ng Presidente yan. So, pero ang Senado, you have got 24 independent republics. That's how he describes it. But my thinking is the more experienced you are, the more the tendency to be on the swing side. Eh. Kasi you're more experienced.
That's right, that's right.
That's my thinking. I may be wrong there, but yun yung pag sanay ka na, kabisado mo na,
Okay.
you'll have more authority eh. Right now, sino lang ba dyan ang may institutional memory? Marami rin. Tatlo lang talaga ang bago eh. Si Rafi Tulfo, si Robin Padilla, at si Mark Villar. Di ba?
And let's bagitin lang natin yung mga wala na dito.
Okay.
Di ba? Drilon is no longer here.
Kiko Pangilinan.
Kiko Pangilinan.
Tito Soto.
Tito Soto is no longer here. And you did have, speaking to the 24 republics, you did have the leadership, the experienced leadership of Tito Soto there, which brings up an important point. Who's the Senate President? Who are you seeing or hearing?
Well, what I've been hearing is that it will be Senator Villar, the
which one? Which one?
elder. The elder Villar.
The mother. Okay. Sige. So,
Kaya mo yan, sir.
Kaya.
Yes.
Okay.
Kanina, pinoint out natin, since wala pa naman talaga si Jojo Binay, no, paano yung anak niya? Since si Jojo Binay, wala pa naman talaga sa top 12. How about Nancy? Where do you see her heading?
I don't know kung maglalaro yung mag-ama eh. I mean, they cannot be both in the opposition. Di ba? Parang...
By the way, how do you see that dynamics going on? I mean, you've seen the memes, you've seen that very valid point. You have at least 5 na magkakamag-anak doon. Isang mag-ina, isang mag-ama, magkapatid, and ano pa ba?
Yung isang senador, posibleng maging kapatid ng Pangulo.
Di ba?
What is the conventional saying that there are no permanent something, only permanent interests?
Yeah.
So I suppose interest will prevail. I mean, whatever benefits interests of the family, they will work together with respect to that. But in the others, there's be some independence.
And you would take for granted that these relatives will be voting together each and every time?
Not really consistently together every time. No? That's why I pointed out right away the brothers JV and
Ayun dalawa hindi magsasama
Jinggoy.
sa
Hindi
bote.
magsasama sa bote. Yeah. No, but as far as the
Kahit
others,
kutsaan lang, gano'n?
It's that bad?
Kahit kutsaan lang.
but as far as the others, there may be instances that Senator Nancy would be different from the father. We've seen that in
That
some.
is, of course, if the father makes it to the top 12.
Yeah.
I have a question, really, more of a question to you guys. Where is Bongo?
Sure.
That's a good question.
There, here's
where
Bongo.
is Bongo? Saan mo
Here.
siya ilalagay?
That's a good question. I'll
okay,
throw it back
okay.
to you. So, where you wouldn't presume that he would
Automatic
automatically be...
administration?
He's not in good terms with the vice president, the putative vice president. And he didn't support Bongbong. I mean, because his patron, the president, didn't overtly, until the last minute, side with the president, putative president.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean,
But using your parameters, and I agree with your parameters, I would put him in a swing.
Talaga.
Yeah.
Sir Mon, what do you think?
Very pragmatic.
Well, I have a different thing in mind. Let me comment later. But
Depends
Before
on
I-
President Duterte.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a good point,
Good
di ba? That also begs the question, what happens to President Duterte?
Right.
After the elections, is he still an influential person on the presumption that Sara is not necessarily a proxy in everything?
Well, the little that I know, that I've worked with them for a small amount of time, I'm inclined to think that the president really is going to retire. And by all indications, at least in the past year, the influence has not been very much straight from the president.
But Gretchen gave Senator Bongo, that's why we're discussing this. Gretchen gave Bongo a rack to hang his hat on, kumbaga. And if we take Bongo really deriving his power and his standing and his stature and his influence on President Duterte, that still leaves us with a question of, ganito na lang, kung ikaw si Bongo,
Saan ka?
Kaya nga sabi ko swing vote eh.
Swing
Kasi
vote.
that's the most practical
Baba
thing
natin.
to do.
okay.
shouldn't that same thing apply also to Bato? Mga bata ni Presidente yan.
Okay.
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 Sige.
That's interesting.
Tingnan natin kung kakasya pa.
Hindi ba mag-a-adjust yan?
Okay,
Mag-a-adjust yan.
nag-adjust yan.
Okay. By the way, kudos sa tech team natin, ha? I just wanna give
Exactly.
props to our
Sarap
tech
laruin,
team.
no?
Okay. Okay.
Kanina, na-figure out na ba natin, Nancy Binay? What was our response earlier?
Would you presume that si ano?
Well, if the father is placed in the opposition, at least generally speaking, Senator Nancy would be with the father.
Okay.
Generally speaking.
Now let me raise another question. We're trying to determine sino ang admin and reminder lang po sa everyone, hindi pa natin nalalagay yung lahat, di ba? This is not to say na parang nananalo yung swing at saka yung opposition. No! Dito pa lahat na hindi pa natin kinwalify. But here's a question again to Professor Tayo and Edwin. Where will these alignments, what issues will actually cause a divide in the House that you see?
Charter change,
Charter change?
foreign policy.
Meron din tayong chart for that. Do you want to go to that chart?
Sige,
Rob?
Yes.
subukan natin. Charter change. Sige, while Jess is calling it up, Edwin, what issues will divide the House? If assuming that trends hold and you have a president who wins in tandem with his vice president, and you have, as you said, the House will go their way anyway. We will still have the usual supermajority. So which issues actually will divide the House?
So let's start, for example, budget reform. For example lang, para lang maisa-isa natin at least for these topics.
I don't
Is
think
it going to
that's
be a
gonna be-
priority or a secondary priority for a Congress under President assuming, of course, Ferdinand Marcos
Ang
Jr.?
budget reform kasi will depend on the economic team of the president.
That's right. That's right.
So you have a DBCC, so you'll have a budget secretary, then you'll have the head of the finance committee of the Senate. So depends yan. They'll cooperate on coming up with a budget because it's really more professional. It's more, there's nothing to...
I don't presume you'll drop some names about the financial team.
No, I have no idea.
But I'd like to add something with the budget reform. So we have to take note that there's one development that will clearly work into the issue of budget reform, the Mandanas-Garcia ruling.
Okay.
Yeah. So that will be a critical issue. Now, it will also involve, of course, the local officials in the end.
Yeah, but what's there to debate? I mean, the Supreme Court has decided on the Mandanas. The local governments are waiting for this. On the other hand, coming out of COVID, there is that debate on, teka muna, we need to recover first.
Yeah. That's why I'm talking about the budget reforms, because the budget reforms will include which PPAs will be going to the local governments and how they are going to strategize, how these PPAs will actually be absorbed by the local government units, which play right into the heart of budgeting.
Which, by the way, in the economies, parang walang magaling na senador na familiar or well-versed sa economy except maybe
Loren.
perhaps for Sani
Angara, yeah.
Si Loren kasi sa climate change.
Is Recto still there?
No, wala. Congressman.
wala na rin.
He's running for congressman.
Pero finance was once handled by Senator Loren, di ba?
No, he never did.
Di ba?
No, I don't think so.
I thought the team of Senator Sani was...
Sani
were
handled
once,
finance.
Yeah, but the team of Senator Sani were once part of the team
Anyway.
of Senator Loren.
Okay, but very quickly now, gentlemen, of course, we have updated numbers here in our presidential race. Let me run through you through the numbers first again. Still, at the number one spot, you have Ferdinand Marcos Jr. here leading the race with 22.4 million votes, ahead by more than 12 million votes over Robredo, who's currently at 10.6 million votes. Again, a very far third also would have to be Senator Manny Pacquiao at 2 million votes, followed by Manila Mayor Isko Moreno with only 1.4 million votes. And then there's also, of course, Senator Ping Lacson at 696,000 votes. There's also Faisal Mangundato with 95,000 votes, followed by Abella with 70,000 votes, and then Calyodi de Guzman with 62,000 votes, and Norberto Gonzales with 57,000. At ito, panghuli natin, si Montemayor with 40,000 votes so far. Back to you, Sir Roby.
Edmond, kakasako lang ulit yung sinabi mo kanina. Sabi mo 60% pa lang. Sinabi mo, 67%. Baka umano na ako dyan.
Teka, namopya ako sa katabi ko eh.
Yung 68%.
68% na.
They're talking about the 68.
ERs,
That's the ERs. That's the total number of votes cast.
Okay.
In relation to the 65.7 universal, it's only 57.16% of the total votes cast.
Okay.
So, but you're talking about, these are ERs. These are not the total number of votes cast.
I see. Okay.
So,
Just,
dami-
you know,
Could you explain-
in
could you-
layman's terms, can you explain that? Anong pagkakaiba nung total
yung
votes cast
57
and election returns?
ang total number of votes already counted by the transparency server is 37.565 million. That's about 57.16% of the universe of
I see.
So,
Transmittal rate refers to the VCM's transmission.
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
In Bongbong's case, right now, he is already at 34.10%. So we're looking at lalampasan ba niya yung 50%. So he's shy. Well, first we hit 39. So he's near that kasi he's already at 22. You only have to reach 25 to hit 39%. Then if you hit 32 million, then you hit 50%. Beyond that, majority na siya. I mean, we're looking at, if you're going to include the 1.8 overseas votes, he has to hit 33 point something million.
Okay.
And that becomes majority president na siya.
By the way, just so we don't leave this thread loose, we do have an expert on the automated elections here with us. Mon Isberto from the private sector has been quite involved in really getting us to the level of automation that we have right now. But Mon, ang tanong ko sa iyo is, what was going on earlier today? I mean, not necessarily that you would know, but kanina parang nababagalan tayo, and then you know the stories on social media, yung mga tao, mga nasirang VCM machines. I know you were more involved on the transmission side and so on. But as far as you know, and without prejudice to what the Comelec said, that they will still investigate, as far as you know, what could have been going on and hopefully is getting fixed?
Well, the one obvious factor you have to consider, Robbie and Gretchen, is that, well, these machines are kind of old. Okay? So medyo, maintenance is going to be a critical issue.
Almost as old as Gretchen.
No.
These machines. Hindi naman.
Not 20. Ganun.
No, but they've accumulated some years. So maintenance is really a concern. No? But on the other hand, the number of cases of VCM machines simply not functioning, was a surprise to me because there were a lot of reports of
Corrupted SDs and
Paper
for all
jams,
sorts of different
scanners.
kinds of problems na hindi gumagana at all. Dati kasi yung mga problema would come up during transmission,
yes.
at the end process. But this time around, it came very early in the game.
Okay.
So that was a bit of surprise
And that
to
was
me.
hardware side.
hardware side, different kinds of hardware issues, specifically for the VCM machines. Now, I don't know if that was on a scale that could affect the outcome.
Yes, but as you said before, traditionally ang binabantayan natin problema is in the transmission. Bumuhos naman ngayon, bumulusok naman bigla. As far as you can tell, we're okay. It looks good.
Oh, well, my recollection, this is probably the fastest reporting time that has happened since we went automated.
Although in 2016, I think Grace po on the eve of the on the night of the election, immediately conceded.
Well, but here in this case, you have what, 50 plus 60%.
Right.
We're not even midnight.
Right.
Yeah.
In the past, it would take maybe 1, 2 a.m. in the morning of the following day before you would get a substantial count of this on this scale.
Can we
Baka
say,
kasi
for
walang
example,
ano.
some improvement in the telcos?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Baka kasi walang 7-hour glitch.
Oh, no, that's a good point because the glitch before, I think, for example, in 2016, if memory serves correct, before midnight, the trend for the results for the president
Yeah.
was pretty much set already. It was the vice presidential race that was closer and that was affected. But as far as the general results were concerned, di ba, parang ano naman eh.
Yeah.
What delayed it really was the fact that it was so close.
Well, for 2019, yes, the 7-hour glitch was a factor. For 2016, I'm trying to recall right now, but it was basically either midnight or shortly after
Right.
midnight when you got really a sense of where the vote was going. It just goes to show that automated elections can really be fast. So it's caused politics to take a different turn.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, that's just I'm thinking here in technology terms. It's just the way elections are now. It's not just the counting; it's also the communications. No? Social media is now the dominant form of communications in election campaigns. So you're now in a political process that moves much faster, right? Significantly faster than it used to even just 5-6 years ago. So
Medyo mabilis din ang emosyon. Dahil nga,
kasama na yun.
we're seeing
Kasama na
trends, right? And there are pros and cons with that system. I'd like to ask more about that. But for now, let's see how exactly the regions voted for the presidential polls. And we go back to Juster, who is with our touchscreen.
Okay, again, let's try to take a look at like what Gretch mentioned, how regions voted so far with 68% of the votes already in. At least for the National Capital Region, you would think, of course, somehow Manila Mayor Isko Moreno would somehow put up a fight here considering na medyo may pagka-battleground din naman ito, but only at least at 8.9% of the votes so far here in NCR, as you can see in this slice right here. Again, majority of the votes coming in for Bongbong Marcos with 55% of the votes, and then Vice President Leni Robredo with only 30% so far here in NCR. Let's move on over, of course, Region 1. Medyo expected na natin yan as to how things are going to fare out for this particular region. Bongbong Marcos with a whopping 85%, and then Vice President Leni Robredo with only 10% of the votes so far here in Region 1. To be followed by Region 2, also majority, of course, still for Bongbong Marcos with 86%, followed by Leni Robredo with only 9.2%, as represented by this pink slice right here. And then also for Region 3, ito medyo nabawasan ng konti, but still, majority of the votes at 64%, close to 65% really for Bongbong Marcos, and then Vice President Leni Robredo with only 26.8%. Region 4A, tingnan natin, still majority Bongbong Marcos at 54.6%. Pretty much, of course, pag pinagsama-sama natin, at least Region 3 and Region 4A, you would see again the Lingayen to Lucena corridor pretty much going, favoring Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And then let's also go here to Region 4B. Ito medyo nabawasan na, still, of course, most of the votes coming in for Bongbong Marcos with 45%, and then Leni Robredo with 33.8%. Of course, Bicol region, as expected, Leni Robredo dominating that particular part here with 77%, and then Bongbong Marcos getting 17% of the votes. And then Region 6 also, we have to take, you have Vice President Leni Robredo also at 48%, and then Marcos with 38%. 46.3%. And then Region 7, pretty much the same scenario also. Majority of the votes here for Bongbong Marcos at 56%, and then Robredo with only 22%. And then there's also Region 8, Bongbong Marcos still at 65%, and then Robredo with only 21%. Again, nag-focus na lang muna tayo sa ating top 2 runners for the sake of this conversation. Again, also Region 9, Marcos with 62%. And then, as you can see right here, Pacquiao putting up a fight here, surpassing Leni Robredo, Pacquiao with 16%, and then Robredo with 15%, at least for Region 9. And then, of course, there's also Region 10, Marcos at 72%, Leni Robredo at the second spot here with 11%, and Manny Pacquiao also with 11%. Dami pa, Region 11, let me double check first. Okay, Region 11, Bongbong Marcos with 85%. And then you also have Manny Pacquiao at second spot here with 6%, followed by Robredo with only 5%. And then Region 12, also pretty much the same scenario here. Marcos with 65%, Pacman with 17%, and then Leni with 12%. Region 13, also pretty much telling the same story here. Majority of the votes for Bongbong Marcos, and then Robredo, and basically switching spots here with Manny Pacquiao, Robredo with 18%, and then Pacquiao with 9%. And then let's go to the Cordillera here. Marcos, of course, as expected, with 80%, and then Robredo with 10%. BARM also, where of course Vice President Leni Robredo has managed to at least secure some support with only 24% compared to Bongbong Marcos's 63%. And then, paano naman yung mga kababayan natin overseas? Majority of them at 71% voted for Bongbong Marcos. So any insights from our experts?
Well, it's overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
The question lang, however, is saan pa makakakuha ng boto si Leni? Because we don't have a percentage of, for each region, how many votes have come in.
Okay, let's try to, since you mentioned that, let's try to take a look at our transmission here when it comes to top provinces. Voter turnout per provinces. As you can see right here, at least in some particular areas, those at least in color blue would show that these areas somehow have already, at least voter turnout is already at 80%. And then for those majority of areas in the red, then yung medyo may kababaan at less than 60%. Dun sa mga area so far, kung saan nanalo si VP Robredo, you would see medyo may kababaan din yung bilang ng mga boto, at least kanina. No? Titingnan natin yung mapa, for example, Sorsogon, voter turnout is only at 53%.
So far?
So far, yes.
Okay, so there's about 47 that you can still theoretically harvest.
So, tama ba ang pagkaintindi ko? Pagka yung pula, may mga 40% pa ng
Na hindi pa
remaining votes na
nabibilang.
inaantay pa natin.
So far, yes. For example, let's take a look at Negros Oriental. Turnout is at 400,000 compared to total voters, which is at 932,000.
So less than half pa yan.
Less than
Medyo
half.
marami-rami
So that talks about the turnout as to how many people actually voted. No?
Voted.
Oh,
That's
but the question now is, of the results we're seeing now, how much of the total, how much of the voters that actually voted is now counted?
Okay, let's try to check if we can at least show that in this chart right here. Hopefully we'll try to get some information on that. For example, let's go to Ilocos Norte. The only data, at least that we have so far, you have 434,000 registered voters. 69% of those already voted for Bongbong Marcos, at least in Region 1 here in Ilocos Norte. That so far is a data that we have. We'll try to figure out if there's anything that we can pull up here to answer more of what you were asking earlier, Prof. Tayo.
I-click mo yung kay Leni Robredo, same region.
So
Same
lahat yan
region.
mag-ping, but let's try to restart. Okay?
Yung kay Leni Robredo, same region, she accounts for what percent of the,
For Leni Robredo, you only have 8,000 votes basically for Region 1, based on our heat map here.
About 9,000.
Well, that's pretty much, of course, expected. But let's try to zoom in on some other areas here. For example, let's try to click on Pampanga. As you can see right here, you have 528,000 votes here so far for Bongbong Marcos. That accounts for 33% of the total voters for Pampanga alone. Bongbong Marcos with 528,000, and then Leni Robredo less than by half here, 224,000 compared to Marcos.
So that's only about 50% because 520 plus 200.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Still a long way to go
So
here, at least for
marami pa tayong
Pampanga.
inaantay.
Marami pa yan.
Oo.
Eh, malaking ano yan eh. Malaking voting province yan eh.
Looking at these numbers, actually medyo ina-expect naman natin na kahit papaano ganyan. And they do reflect the numbers on the surveys. But I'm just wondering, wala bang epekto in the last few weeks, last few months of this of Leni Robredo's campaign? They went house to house. We've seen massive rallies. Did they not target the right markets or right regions, right places? Why is there seemingly little to no movement in the numbers?
You know, I think the house-to-house campaign is really are fundamentally being done by the volunteers, and it depends on where the volunteers live. So, for instance, if you're in Quezon City, you'll spend time to visit the maybe the D and E classes of areas of Quezon City. So you do it by scale using the available volunteers of the particular regions or particular cities and that. So it's really a shotgun approach where that's the only way that you can scale it up.
Yeah.
Diba? So you ask all your volunteers to go out and just share the gospel of Leni to all the people that you can reach out to. It's fundamentally different. It's better than nothing at all.
Yeah.
So that's one way. We're looking right now, Leni's already at 16.61% of the votes that have been counted. So you're looking at her numbers in pulsations around 23. So there's a variance of about 7%. So let's see if we can still go up. Or basically, if it goes up beyond that, did the house-to-house add more votes to Leni? And did the rallies also do conversion? By the way, in 2016, there's an exit poll of SWS. They were asked, when did you make the decision? 18% said, we decided on the day of the election. 15% decided on May, 12% on April, 8% on March. So that's an exit poll in 2016. We don't know what, but these are the ways that people make decisions. So apparently, if that trend is carried over to 2022, you've got around 20% still making the decisions, changing their minds on the day of or rather those who have not decided yet, making a decision on election day itself.
And the front runner will still be.
We don't know if it's, but you know, it's a
Depende
small,
rin.
65 million up of 20%. It's a small amount, 1 point something lang yan, di ba? So it's a pretty small, but those are the data that we have, and looking into when does a person make a decision. So by and large, they make the decisions early. That's where hard and soft votes come in. Pag hard ka na, talagang loyal ka na sa kandidato mo. So you don't change minds. But you're going after the soft votes or the non-soft voters of your kalaban.
But a soft vote made for which the decision was made on the day of the elections is still a soft vote.
That's right.
Yes.
Diba?
Yes.
Hindi rin loyalista yun.
Hindi rin. So, di ba, nagbabago-bago. So, pero itong recent na pulse, I don't know if the survey, yung for instance, kay Bongbong, 88% of the 56% hard na eh. Kay Leni, 78% of the 24% nag-hard din na rin eh.
Yeah.
Pero if you look at the 88% of the 56, you multiply that's already about 49%.
Yeah.
So, kumbaga, yun na ang floor mo. That's the floor of Bongbong's vote.
Yeah.
I mean, that's based on the survey. Of course, those are snapshots in time.
I'm glad you acknowledged that, because I wanted to look for a reason to instigate a conversation. No? I mean, not to, I won't knock, miracles and a last-minute surge and a comeback. As you said, 70% refers to transmission, not necessarily the total number of votes. So,
Counted, yeah.
So marami pa rin tayo. We still have about 40% of the actual votes. But Edwin and Professor Tayao, if I may, if the trend holds, and I want to build the scenarios, not for a Marcos presidency, but for Leni Robredo. What happens to Leni if this holds? if this trend holds and you have a President Marcos, but at the same time, we just talked about the pink movement. What do you see happening to Leni Robredo and that pink movement? That, let's face it, in the same way that we could face a Marcos presidency, let's also be honest and face it, that seems to be a genuine movement. What happens to Leni and what happens to the pink movement?
Well, qualitatively, we're looking at, obviously, quantitatively, kulang ang boto ni Leni, but qualitatively, you've seen the passion of the volunteers. So, kumbaga, pag may biruan nga, kapag passion ang maging metric, panalo si Leni. Pero hindi passion ang metric eh. But qualitatively, you've seen that that's unheard, unseen phenomenon before. People going out of their way, doing house to house, printing at their own expense. So this must be harnessed. And this is what they call the pink movement. It depends on Leni what her decision would be. Should she decide to lead this, then she can take over this and become a civil society movement. Obviously, it's a civil society movement because she's not in power. If she was in power, she would have been the opposition. So, in the absence of any government position, she becomes the head of the civil society movement, principally the pink movement. How she develops it further, how she cultivates the passion of the supporters, how she faces, for instance, does she speak truth to the Bongbong presidency, that all depends on her willingness to take on the reins of leadership of the pink movement.
Edwin and Edmond, can I bring in the question of time here? The element of time. The anecdote is that VP Leni decided in October to run. And the anecdotes are that Bongbong Marcos has been preparing for this for the past 6, maybe even longer years. So if VP Leni is going to pursue something, she should spend more time in what she wants to pursue? Is that
No.
or that doesn't necessarily work that way? What do you think?
Well, the earlier explanation, that I think the phrase that was used is slow burn. But VP Leni is already VP.
Okay.
No, I simply did not agree with the explanation that she declared rather late. Kasi VP ka na eh. The assumption already is that you will be running for president. Unless, of course, you make a declaration otherwise. No? So, in other words, you don't really have to go around and tell everyone that, hey, I'm going to run for president. The assumption remains unless it is said otherwise.
But also, couldn't it have been a disadvantage that she was busy doing the work of a vice president instead of building connections towards a possible campaign? Because as we've seen, mahalaga yung mga political networks in being able to turn those colors around.
Actually, the doing service is part of the whole political building. No? So if it was translated early enough, of course, that's an entirely different story. Now, as far as the argument that the campaign has been ongoing for quite a while, if the overall scenario really is not ripe for such a campaign, for such messaging, it will still not resonate.
Professor, hold that thought. Babalikan pa rin natin itong usapan ito. But we just got a statement from Senate President Tito Soto, who is currently running in third for Vice President. Here's what he has to say, and we quote, "We presented an alternative for a better system in governance and politics, but the electorate had their minds conditioned elsewhere." This is Senate President Tito Soto speaking. "Word of honor and loyalty are far greater importance than an election win."
Okay.
I just wonder how that is going to affect our Senate. I mean, he's the leader, Senate President there, with his absence, and he has been there for quite a long time. How is that going to affect things, the swing of power within the Senate?
I remember when I was talking to Frank Drilon, he's the one, even if he was acting as opposition, the minority leader, everybody referred to him because he had the institutional memory. So what you're looking for in the Senate is the one who has the institutional memory. If not with the staff, someone in the senator who has the institutional memory of the Senate. Now that Tito is gone, now that Frank is gone. So you're looking for someone who has the longest institutional memory. And even if he was in the opposition, he would still be respected by the members of the majority.
Senate.
Because ang Senado naman natin, at kahit naman saan, wala mang permanent na away.
Yeah.
Diba? We're not like Republicans or Democrats that who have steadfast beliefs in certain ideals. We don't So, but that's a problem right now. So who's going to take over? Maybe in terms of institutional memory, Cheese would have that. Lauren Legarda would certainly have that.
Yeah.
So those are the people you're looking for as how do we do this and all that. But it's all up to them.
Oh, sige. I just want to pick up yung conversation natin about Lenny and the pink movement. As we said, no, you can look at the past and how she ran this campaign and how she built up or not whatever case she had over the past 6 years. But can we also look at the pink movement right now, however you want to define it, and what Lenny's options are in the coming days, starting tomorrow. Again, if the trends hold, I'll grant that to you. But what is the opportunity, if any, and what are the risks for Lenny Robredo and the pink movement, Professor Tayo?
Well, I can only take off and build on what Sec Edwin already mentioned. And I will take it a notch higher. No? Okay, fine. She can lead the civil society, but why not start at the very... You don't want to change the charter, but at the very least, institutionalize political parties in this part of the world. I mean, that's the one thing clearly that's lacking. No? As I've always said, sabi ko nga, ilang beses ko nang sinasabi sa discussions natin, no? I refuse to call it a political system. I mean, especially in this election, at least before, there's a semblance of political parties actually, playing a significant role. Ngayon magde-declare ka ng candidacy mo and then suddenly, iba na pala yung political party tinatakbuhan mo. Or that the political party that supposedly nominated you is suddenly no longer supporting you. Why? Precisely because a single person of one political party suddenly decides that this is not the way to go and therefore I will have a change of heart. And it's a chain reaction, pati funding mo. And laging pinag-uusapan, this guy has more funding, the other guy doesn't have enough funding. But if you come to think of it and you look deeper, the funding, if not equally, the same with the candidates, it's not really significantly different. No? So bakit? Kasi pati yung pag-raise mo ng fund, hindi mo alam exactly. That's why you can even pocket excess of campaign funds. No? So pero kung meron kang institutional political party, it's subject to the same accounting and auditing procedure as a public office is, no? Then at the very least you will have a better handle.
Sir, what
as
do you
far
mean
as
by
politics.
institutionalized political party? Does that come close to the two-party system?
No, that's always a misnomer, and I always correct that. There was never a two-party system in the country. The only time that we could say there was a two-party system was when we were still hoping to be, campaigning to be independent. No, so the two-party system that's referred to was when the narrative was for us to be independent or to be a state of the United States, and that was between the Nationalista and the Federalista Party. Nung nagkaroon ng Liberal Party, that was the difference between Manuel Rojas and Manuel Quezon. No, the Harry Hawes Cutting Act and the Tidings-McDuffie debate at that time. No, so the Liberal Party, the Liberal wing of the Nationalista bolted from the Nationalista Party, and that has been the story of the other political parties. No. Bolting off from the other political parties. There's no country, to my mind, that legislates there can only be two political parties. Even the American founding fathers prevented the founding or the organizing of political parties in the Federalist Papers. No? Pero hindi naman nila naiwasan yun. Nagkaroon pa din ng political parties. No? Kasi whether we like it or not, there will be some organizing that will happen later. But if you set down the rules, the electoral system is clear. Maganda yung 87 kasi inintroduce yung supposedly proportional system of representation or at least an idea of it. Pero parang hindi yata na-communicate na maayos and look at the kind of party list system that we have right now. If we built on those reform provisions in the Constitution, including the anti-political dynasty, then we could have an entirely different story altogether that we're talking about now.
But to your point, Edmond, parang at this point in time, parang things are moving in the opposite direction.
Yun nga eh.
Like the Senate now looks more and more like a local office. No? Parang yung mayor, governor, etc., magkakamag-anak lahat. No? How is there a way that this thing can be reversed, or are we stuck in this situation indefinitely?
Kaya nga kung hindi pa tayo mag-agree to change the whole setup altogether, we can start with the political party. Yan yung sa akin doable at why? Kasi the reason why we have the same names running for office is because if you're running for office, even if you have a popular name, if you don't have the resources, paano? Oh, now if you have access to resources, which part of the economy will you be getting resources from? No? And how accountable would that be? No? And apart from that, kanino ka may utang na loob pag nag-raise ka ng funds? I mean, you're talking of very serious monies here, no? Eh kung out of pocket mo, paano? And this also is the explanation why even before elections start, may nanalo na kasi walang kalaban eh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think that there was some hope or expectation that the Lenny movement would create a counterforce to what we see right now. So far, at least the numbers are showing that it's still not quite there. How can a civic movement, is that possible?
Yeah.
Create a constituency that would push reforms in the direction that you're talking about?
Well, I'm inclined to think that's a good start. In fact, one of the reasons also why the country has a very strong civil society movement is because we have a very weak set of public institutions. You go around the country, there are areas where people rely more on civil society, more on the church for some basic services instead of the government. No? Kaya nga lagi ko sinasabi, hindi mo masyado pa ma-rely yung social media kung talagang spread ang pag-uusapan mo. Kasi may mga areas nga na kuryente pa lang problema mo na eh. How much more telecommunications? So until such time that we have hit a level that somehow can equalize socio-economic profiles.
Okay.
Oh.
We've dissected the numbers in the presidential, vice presidential, and the senatorial races. Let's check in now with Jester on the leaders in the local races. Jess?
Okay, this time meron na lang clearer picture at least in certain parts, especially in Metro Manila, kung sino more or less yung mananalo. Let's kick things off with Manila City, as you can see right here. You have Honey Lacuna with close to 64% of the votes at 490,000. A far second would be Alex Lopez with only 19% of the votes at 152,000. Amado Bagatsing likewise, as you can see right here, with only 104,000 votes. Now this time, let's go to Pasig. As you can see right here, Vico Soto still managing to get 88% of the votes at 322,000. Compare that, of course, to EU Caruncho, despite getting the endorsement of the unit team here at 11.92% with 43,688 votes. Marikina pretty much is also a sure shot here for Marcy Chodoro with 82% of the votes compared to Bayani Fernando with only 17.94%. Also, of course, tingnan natin, Quezon City. Joy Belmonte still leading here, 60.5% of the votes, 573,000, compared, of course, to Mike Defensor with only 361,000 so far with 38% of the votes. Makati pretty much also a done deal here for Abby Binay with 95% of the votes compared to Joel Hernandez, an independent candidate with only 4.7% of the votes at 14,752. Guys, any particular area here that you want to take a look at, even in the provinces as well?
Gusto kong tignan yung laban ni Goyo Larrazabal and
Pwede.
Yeah, Goma.
Province.
Richard
Provinces
Gomez.
tayo, ano?
Yeah.
Hopefully makita natin, ano?
Ormoc.
Ang problema nga lang, teka. Tignan natin. Unfortunately, medyo try natin i-figure out, but we have limited data so far here. While we're trying to crunch up the numbers for Ormoc, let's try to take a look at Laguna muna, for example, where Ramil Hernandez is leading here with 57% of the vote, 780,000, compared to Sol Aragones with 41% at 564,000. Also, let's try to take a look at Cebu. Again, still, Gwen Garcia won Cebu up by 80%. The incumbent way ahead compared to Ace Durano with only 19% of the votes at 250,000. Iloilo, let's try to check in with Toto Defensor leading 97% of the votes, 645,000 compared to Noli Hill with only 2.8%. Pampanga, you want to take a look? Medyo close fight to compared to the other areas, but still Delta Pinelda ahead with 58%, 465,000 compared to Danilo Bailon at 332,000, that's 41.6% of the votes.
Sino si Delta? Anak? Delta
Okay,
Pinelda.
gentlemen, any insights at least so far on what we've seen in the local races?
The incumbents are holding on.
I'm wondering, kanina nabanggit niyo, Professor Tayo, Mandanas, di ba? How does the Mandanas ruling, budgets moving, if you follow the wisdom of follow the money in everything, and you have these budgets moving to the local levels, how does that change the politics in the country in terms of, the power of local governments vis-a-vis a very popular administration, if ever?
Well, theoretically, of course, you have more money, you have more resources. That means more influence.
So it's harder to be the incumbent ba?
No.
Kasi pag Mandanas ruling, pupunta sa incumbent yung kaban eh.
Yeah.
So mas mahirap mo talunan ng mas mahirap mo talunan yung incumbent dahil I can provide all the services,
Yan na nga.
di ba?
So, yun nga. Yung
So it makes
influence
it-
talagang madadagdagan
So it
yan.
makes it
Oo.
it makes someone fighting against an incumbent more difficult.
That's right.
That's why you
Right.
see the incumbents holding on.
Yeah. Pero hindi pa halos nabababa naman lahat eh. In fact, the decentralization transition plan is still being finalized. Which means the projects, plans, and activities funded at the national level, hindi pa final yung listahan kung saan kukunin yung pera na ibababa. No? So, but of course, mandatory yung pagbaba, so they have to, work their way through it. No? Pero yung budgeting ang maapektuhan kasi may madedefund kasi ng mga PPA sa taas. Yun yung sinasabi ko kanina na pagdating sa budget reforms, tatamaan yun.
Yun nga yung tanong ko. For example, health is devolved. Di ba? Education is devolved also?
No. It's tangentially devolved. That's how it's called by Senator.
What does that mean?
It's another term for shared power, supposedly.
Shared.
Environment and education.
So we will have revisionism going on.
Exactly. And, yun yung tanong ko.
Paano revisionism?
Okay, let's bring it back to the prospect of a Marcos presidency. And let's face it, one of the biggest concerns in this campaign was what the campaigns were built on. And there was a lot of concern about disinformation, a lot of concern about revisionist history, a lot of investments really in rehabilitating the Marcos name as a candidate. It looks more and more like we now have 72% of transmissions, looks more and more like a Marcos presidency, both on the national and the local levels. And we've had education officials here saying that it's not even on the national level, it's on the local level. And we had Sergius Mena saying here that it's not even the national, it's not even on the local. It's in the level of those who are printing the textbooks. Diba?
Right.
So, disinformation was such a big topic and an issue for this campaign. What happens to not only disinformation, but education, the educational system, as we'll say it directly, under the Marcos administration? What are your concerns there?
You remember the platform of Leni, had she become the president, would be to correct historical revisionism. That's one of her platforms, to set right what happened to Philippine history. Here, you've seen in the present administration, disinformation worked, and they continue it. That's why Senator Drilon was questioning the budget of PCOO. Sino ba itong mga consultants nyo? If it's working, why would I change it? If I benefited from the foundation of this information and it worked, what's my incentive to take it away? In fact, like I don't know if I told you, Roby, I don't have to suppress media. All I have to do is make a counter, my alternative truth, and propagate that. So I don't have to be as harsh as my father, the former president, the President Marcos. I'll just try to suppress. I just try to defeat your voice. It's a share of voice right now on social media. The higher your share of voice, people will believe that. So I can be a soft dictator without being too harsh, without looking like an autocrat, and yet still getting my way.
Although I can't reconcile how we mentioned a while ago we had problems when it comes to the infrastructure for the online. I mean, kung may problema tayo sa kuryente, paano pa yung sa social media? Kung marami po sa kababayan natin ang walang access or they have limited access, how exactly were they?
That's the function of your senators. Your senators here will promise you the interconnectivity because that's a basic, we're looking at it as a basic human right. Interconnectivity, being able to access social media, because that's important for us. So interconnectivity will be I'm sure one of the platforms of one of the senators. In fact, Manny Pacquiao said it. And that's really to the benefit also of our economy. So there's a business sense to make sure that there's interconnectivity all throughout. The digital economy is growing by leaps and bounds.
I'd like to follow through on Gretchen's point, if I'm getting that point also. Trying to reconcile two things that we're hearing. On the one hand, kawawa yung mga kababayan natin. We saw that during the pandemic, especially in education, walang access to data, walang access to the internet, walang gadgets, and so on. And yet, in this campaign, we're saying social media was the dominant platform. How did that happen? How do we reconcile that? On the one hand, no access. On the other, we do have an expert pala dito on access. Mon.
Well, actually, the irony here is that we're world leaders in internet usage. The Philippines, for the past 6 years, the Filipinos have been spending, as of 2021, 10 hours and 56 minutes on the internet. 4 hours and 15 minutes of that on social media. The smartphone penetration rate in the Philippines as of 2021 was 75%. So we may not be the most internet-exposed country in the world, but we're not the laggards. So that's why social media is such now a powerful force in communications. In fact, which changed the landscape of communications, I think, irreversibly. Now you can be your own publisher. In fact, many people are earning money that way. Okay?
Your own publisher, your own broadcaster.
So it's a much more, in fact, that is the challenge that I see.
Yeah.
How do you now have a dialogue or a conversation in a situation where it's much more confusing?
No. And where basically we are not the gatekeepers.
Right.
Gatekeepers, I think is now in a not capital G, but a small g.
Small g.
No? There are many gatekeepers.
Professor Taya, what's your take on media right now? And as a stakeholder in these elections, we lost. I mean, I'll quote Pulitzer Prize winning winner Manny Mogato in his essay sa Facebook. And it's captured in his title, We Failed. And he was basically not an indictment, but generally not even a mea culpa, just a statement of fact that Manny Mogato feels that something's happened to media. We are not as influential. We tried, but we failed. What's your take on media here as a stakeholder, as somebody who was running to be influential still in our national affairs?
Well, if the assumption is that the message has not been effective and therefore did not resonate, and therefore not significant as a factor in the deciding of the voter, then that is a accurate conclusion. Pero ako kasi ang tinitingnan ko again, is not just the messaging, not just the information that's being thrown now. In fact, a more serious study should be undertaken as to what has really been the considerations of the voter. Kasi I don't think that when you say revisionism, I'm not really sure how much has been revised really, if you can in fact revise. No? Siguro, pag titingnan natin doon sa mga textbooks, we should really flag if some of the facts mentioned in the textbooks have really misinformed the public. But through and through in the past, 10 or so years, I think the information in the textbooks in education has remained the same. There was a dictatorship, and there are desaparecidos, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I'd rather raise...
Mon, pasensya na, we just don't want to lose this because we have Mr. J.V. Ejercito, who is currently in 10th place in the senatorial list. He's joining us, Mr. Ejercito. Good evening po. Andiyan pa ba? Mr. Ejercito, are you there? Okay, mukhang we'll try to get him back. Sige. I'm sorry, Mon, for interrupting you. You were saying?
No, wait. No, I was just going to say that. Remember the Majoha incident? I think the story is not so much that the story is out there, but I think because there's a vacuum in the story.
Yeah.
So when there is a vacuum, when people don't know, then you can write your story.
Yeah.
So I think that's more the context that actually is happening. It's not just this politics, but there's so many things that school children don't learn.
Yeah.
About our history, whether recent or the very, very past.
Is it possible to revisit our textbooks given under Marcos presidency?
I don't think that would be rejected outright. There has to be an explanation if it will be rejected. So I think marami talagang tawag dito, magrereklamo kung that's blatant, no? An act on the part of would-be president.
But let me quote Sir Chismeñas again, because he was saying, to his point, sabi niya, one thing is learned is you don't even need to corrupt DepEd at the highest level. You don't even need to corrupt the regional DepEd. Kailangan lang kilala mo kung sino yung nagpiprint na mga textbook. Diba? In that regard, I guess the other point is you don't even need to be blatant. Diba? And let me also say this in fairness to whoever is the next government, no? And if that's a market. Let me also say this in fairness. It's been a problem in all administrations.
I was about to say that.
Diba?
I mean,
the quality in general, the quality of our textbooks in general. Diba?
I think it's become more pronounced right now because of the specter of a Marcos presidency. And that's why we're looking at, even in 2016 when he was running for vice president, there were attempts to correct the historical inaccuracies. And that's why there were people coming out and saying, these are my experiences in martial law. So that's why with a potentially incoming Bongbong presidency, how do we now correct historical revisionism? The point that Edmund was saying was maybe you're saying that there's a dictator, there were desaparecidos, but the tonality of those literature is such that it's so shallow that you just tend to ignore. You don't realize ang sama pala nito.
Pinagtatawanan lang natin, yung pala talagang kumakabit. Ano?
Medyo mahaba-haba pa yung usapan na yan. But, we can go on all night, but we have back on the line J.V. Ejercito joining us via phone. He is currently in 10th place of the senatorial race. Senator, former Senator J.V., are you there on the line?
Good evening, Senator.
Very good.
Baka nakamute lang.
Parang ano?
Baka maingay pa doon, di ba?
parang running tally lang, pinasasabik lang tayo ni
Good evening
Senator
po.
Ejercito.
Nandiyan na po ba kayo?
Yes.
Ayun, Senator, the good one. Yun yung tagline.
Yun yung tagline niya. Tama.
Grabe naman kayo.
Tama.
Grabe
Yun ang
naman
tagline,
kayo.
yun ang
Kayo
tagline.
talaga. Nakakita ko kasi lagi sa social media, lagi nyo sinasabi. Kamusta naman po kayo? 10th place. You're running in 10th place. How are you feeling right now? I mean, with how many percent of the votes coming in? Where are you at?
Yes, Gretchen, I'm at my mother's house right now. Ito naman, nagmo-monitor din kami. And of course, we have na in the release, in spite of circumstances that I in to be able to make the top 12. So let's una, when first run, when we start, talaga up from the start, kasi katatakbo ko ng 19, ito na ako, may problema talaga.
Senator?
Yes.
Medyo
Yes.
choppy po tayo.
Choppy pa rin.
Ayan, yan. Better na. Pwede po bang
Yes,
paulit?
Yes. From the start, Gretchen, Roby, it was really an uphill battle from me, no? Talaga sabi ko, 2019 ka, tatakbo lang, tapos ngayon, ito na naman ako. And a national campaign, no, funding is no joke. So talagang problema ako at collateral. Second, wala ako sa mga major potential teams. Hindi ako nasama sa team. Hindi rin ako nasama sa Lenny Kiko group. So wala akong built-in crowd, wala akong tinatungan maraming tao. No? Pangatlo, naman, sabay kong kapatid ko. So, in all of factors, talagang supuyin ko. But, siguro, sa awan ko, sa pagpupursi natin, probably yung performance at track record.
Senator, medyo choppy pa rin po. Babalikan po natin. Let's fix the line first with you so we can understand you well. We'll have former Senator JV Ejercito back on the line later. In the meantime, we go to one of the biggest issues of the day. A number of issues marred this year's polls, from malfunctioning vote counting machines to reports of election-related violence. More than 500 vote-counting machines were defective and 216 SD cards had to be replaced. Shaila Francisco brings us the latest from the COMELEC Command Center for more details. Shaila, first things first, ano bang update natin sa defective VCMs?
Gretchen, as of the latest update of COMELEC, there are a total of 533 defective machines. Out of this number, around 104 or 106 were repaired already. The 533 defective VCMs represent about 0.5.
Okay, we have to cut Shaila Francisco short. We apologize to Shaila, but we understand we have a feed coming in from the headquarters of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Sino bang tao natin doon? Okay. Let's go to the headquarters of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Kanina nandun tayo, but I understand we're expecting an update from the camp of Mr. Marcos.
63.78% right now.
Linawin natin yung sinabi kanina ni Mr. Lacerda, no? Yung 63.78%. That refers to the percentage of VCMs, vote counting machines that have transmitted. Not with some precincts having fewer voters and some having more. That does not necessarily therefore represent a 63%
of the total
number of
Kasi marami
voters.
Marami pang hindi na naaayos pa
Magaling
ng VCM.
mag-mat si Mr. Lacerda talaga pagka may
Kanina pa
talagang may ipaglaban na
ilabas
but the point is well taken. That means that you still have a substantially bigger number of votes if you take it percentage-wise that we are still waiting for. Notwithstanding the fact that this is clearly a trend as well that still has Ferdinand Marcos Jr. clearly in the lead right now. Tama ba yan, Jess? 24.5 million for
24.5
Marcos.
kay Bongbong Marcos
right
and then
now,
for Lenny.
11.6 million for Lenny Robredo, 2.4 million for Manny Pacquiao, 1.5 million for Isko Moreno Dumagoso, and Ping Lacson with 744,000. All the other candidates, of course, having much smaller vote counts. Nabanggit natin si Isko. Kanina we were talking about Lenny. We were, of course, talking the whole evening about Ferdinand Marcos Jr. But let's move on to Isko Moreno. His proxy, his candidate in Manila, Hani Lacuna, looks like she's headed to become not just OIC, but the mayor of Manila. But what happens to Isko now? What is he?
Well, he'll take a 1-year leave because he is a candidate, so he'll be prevented from running. But as to what the future evolution morphing would be, that depends on him. But
Yeah.
Ayaw na daw niya, sabi niya.
Yeah, but let's face it, he's a national figure now. Diba? He's a national figure now. What are the options for him, let's say, in 3 years, in the next elections?
run again in the city or
Yeah.
get appointed under the Marcos presidency if he can work with the
After
guy.
running after estate taxes?
Yeah, well, there are no permanent enemies.
I think
Professor
that's an
Tayo.
understatement.
I'm still trying to figure out the possible answer, but well, if he doesn't find himself being part of the new administration, then he might as well run for the Senate or probably Congress to remain relevant politically or to sustain his political career. Yeah, bata pa naman siya eh.
And Manny Pacquiao?
Well, better remain in the Senate, probably. I mean, there's a reason why he had to transfer from one place to another when he first ran for office, if I remember it right. No? So, there's always something missing as far as his political
Pero di ba
career
may
is
political
concerned.
dynasty na siya sa probinsya niya, sa Jensan?
Oh, yun.
Di ba? So, meron na siyang paglalaroan doon sa probinsya niya. Kahit anong pwesto, pwede niyang gawin. But he's a good senator. He has national recognition. And he can improve himself. Honestly, medyo gumanda na rin yung kanyang mga ideals, principles. He's improved his communication skills. So, may ano pa rin.
Edwin, what you say naman, the observation I've read about that, if you make make an attempt to win the presidency, mahirap na makabawi eh.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think no one has actually survived that. And let's say come back to actually win the presidential election. So, do you see the same thing happening perhaps in the case of these two gentlemen?
Medyo malayo sila eh. I don't think they'll attempt it anytime soon. They have to rehabilitate themselves first. I mean, si Manny Pacquiao is doing better than Isko now.
Yes.
But I think, the fundamental problem with Manny Pacquiao was people, although he's nationally recognized, the skill set to run a president was in doubt. I mean, by and large, people were doubting, can he be a good president? Does he have the necessary skills to govern the country? That was a big question mark. So that shows publicity alone won't cut it. In the case of Isko, I think a lot of people felt he was too emotional. Because, first of all, by the way, he was the first unity candidate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was, his initial campaign foray ads were good. Ako si Isko was very unifying. But somewhere along the way, when Lenny declared and he started hitting the yellows, just suddenly blew up. And then it turns out he's quite emotional. He could not control his emotions, could not control the language that he used. And therefore, it showed that medyo hilaw pa to. In the FGDs, by the way, the qualitative analysis of Isko, his had the biggest leadership equity, and it's his own leadership equity. Sara and Bongbong were borrowed glories from their fathers. They don't have their own independent leadership equity.
Yeah.
Lenny was totally none. Nobody knew ano bang nagawa ni Lenny at that point. That was sometime in July last year. But Isko was firm. That's why meron na siya may pagyayabang. But suddenly, somewhere along the way, came October, he fell.
How does Marcos follow through on his message of unity?
I've spoken to some of them. Number one thing that you should not do is to he said this before in the interview with Corina. Yung nagawa ng tatay ko, yung legacy niya, nandiyan na yan eh. That's cast in stone. Pero he can chart his own legacy. So what does that mean? He spoke on the theme of unity. He can get people from the other colors, from the Dilaos, from the other sides. Most especially on the side of the Dilaos, because these are the most vociferous foes, and why they constitute a minority, they're quite noisy.
Are we going to see people from the Yellows joining the cabinet or joining the government?
I would think that Bongbong Marcos should attempt to invite people to come up and remain true to his promise that I will form a unity cabinet. Because right now, look at the analysis of our foreign investors and all the ratings. They're quite apprehensive. So what does it require this country to regain the confidence, or the president-elect to regain the confidence of the foreign investors, of their credit rating agencies, is to show that you're going to hire competent people shorn of political ambitions, as in professional economic management team. That's one of the things that you're looking at, especially right now where there's a danger that our investment climate might dip because the mere fact that we're electing a son of a former dictator. That doesn't sit well with foreigners. I was interviewed recently by a British journalist. All he was asking us was about, how can you guys elect someone who's the son of a former dictator? Didn't you learn anything from the... No, it's iba yung tingin nila di ba? Iba ang tingin ng Pilipino So, he has to regain the confidence of the international community. Kasi clearly, if assuming he goes above 50, he has a popular mandate. Internally, may mandato siya. Externally, problema yon. You have to prove to the international community that I have what it takes to govern the country professionally.
But even if he wanted to, Professor Tayaw, the reality is there's a moral hazard just being a Marcos. The Marcos family has human rights cases against them. The entire PCGG is about the Marcoses. So just take those two institutions. How does Marcos credibly give direction and mandate to the Commission on Human Rights and the Presidential Commission on Good Government?
Well, the more difficult task there is the PCGG. And I couldn't really guess exactly how that can be addressed, no? But,
because it's not just about them. I mean, it's not just about the Marcoses. It's about their cronies as well. So many families across, and a lot of those families, safe to say, invested in bringing him to power as well.
Exactly. That's why I said I cannot imagine right now how it will be approached or it will be addressed. Now, as far as other people from the different political colors joining the administration, that's not impossible. We were talking off-air earlier about some supporters who used to support also the Yellows before, who are pretty much contributing to the success of would-be Marcos presidency. So let's see.
Okay. Teka, very quickly. Frontrunner Bongbong Marcos has just delivered a 5-minute speech via his Facebook page. Let's listen in.
But I wanted to issue a short statement, and it essentially is a statement of gratitude to all of those who have been with us in this long and sometimes very difficult journey for the last 6 months. I want to thank you for all that you have done for us. There are thousands of you out there, volunteers, parallel groups, political leaders that have cast their lot with us because of their belief in our message of unity, because of their belief in the candidates sa tambalang Marcos at saka Duterte. Kaya't napakalaking pasasalamat namin sa inyong lahat. Bukod pa doon, ay magpapasalamat ako sa mga kababayan ko na nandiyan sila at nagsuporta sila hindi lamang sa mga kandidato, hindi lamang sa aming partido, kung hindi sa magandang bukas ng ating minamahal na Pilipinas. At yan sa akin ang pinakamahalaga na aking makukuha dito sa kampanyang ito. Kaya ako'y nagpapasalamat sa inyong lahat. Kagaya ng aking sinabi, ay hindi pa tapos ang bilangan. Marami nang nagsasabi na tapos na, pero hindi pa talaga. Antayin natin hanggang talagang maliwanag na maliwanag, mag 100% ng pagbilang. Hanggat tayo ay mag-celebrate o mag-isip na tapos na. Ngunit, kahit hindi pa tapos nga ang pagbibilang, hindi makapag-antay ang aking pasasalamat sa inyo lahat. Ang aking pasasalamat sa lahat ng tumulong, sa lahat ng sumapi sa aming ipinaglaban, sa inyong sakripisyo.
That was Ferdinand Marcos Jr. delivering a short speech via his Facebook page. Seems a little bit overwhelmed with emotion in his speech right there.
Yeah, I think he captured it. Sabi niya, hindi lang makapag-antay ang aking pasasalamat sa mga suporta. Sinabi niya, antayin natin na talagang mabuo ang count. We're now at 75% transmission of the VCM machines, pero marami pang botong papasok. Nonetheless, malinaw naman ang trend. Bongbong Marcos telling his supporters and anybody listening in, aantayin natin. But sabi niya lang, hindi makapagantay ang aking pasasalamat, lalong-lalo na sa mga sumuporta sa kanya. Jester, quick update lang kasi nasa 75% na tayo ngayon.
Okay, again, like what you mentioned, 75% of the votes already transmitted. Again, you have Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ahead here with 24.5 million votes, followed by Leni Robredo at 11.6 million. Manny Pacquiao with 2 million, Domagoso, Mayor Isko Moreno also with 1.5 million votes. Again, pretty much the same scenario here nung tinitingnan natin yung mapa since we started our broadcast. As you can see right here, still Bicol region up for Leni, of course. You also have certain portions here of Samar, particularly Northern Samar and Eastern Samar. Robredo securing those places. So doon na natin focus is majority of the country really here, as you can see right here. So far, with all the votes that have been transmitted, is for Bongbong Marcos, but also worth noting here also yung ating boto sa Antique. Kanina pula pa yan, ngayon nasa pink na siya. You have Antique here, but still, of course, too early to tell at this stage. Leni Robredo with 95,000 of the votes and Bongbong Marcos with 79,000. But again, pretty much the same scenario since we started. Again, with Bongbong Marcos with 24.5 million votes compared to Leni Robredo's 11.7 million votes. All right, gentlemen, Gretch?
It seems like supporters of Bongbong Marcos are gathering now outside his camp's headquarters in Mandaluyong. And we have with us over there, Julie Baiza. Julie?
Yes, Gretchen, katatapos nga lang ng statement na ibinigay ni presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos sa harap ng mga taga-media. Umikot yung statement niya sa pagpapasalamat sa libo-libo daw na supporters, volunteers, political leaders na naniwala sa kanilang mensahe ng unity at hindi nga lang sa kanya, kundi sa tambalan nila ni Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte. Sabi niya, hindi pa raw tapos ang bilangan, hintayin daw na pumasok yung 100% ng mga boto. Pero kahit hindi pa tapos, hindi na rin daw talaga makapaghintay ang pasasalamat niya. Sa ngayon, Gretchen, mas dumami yung tao dito sa labas ng headquarters ng ni Bongbong Marcos. Napakaraming mga taga-suporta ngayon na sumisigaw sa pangalan niya at yung mga dumadaan din na mga sasakyan ay pumuputing na.
We continue on. A while ago, we had the same mood, kahit na hindi pa pasok lahat ng mga boto, people are starting to come and join him in celebrating the results that are coming in. Nasa 70+% na po tayo of the VCMs that have been counted, and may paunang mensahe na ang ating frontrunner.
On something that was raised earlier. You mentioned earlier, Edwin, how foreign investors have been, the sentiment among foreign investors on the potential outcome of these elections. Let's talk about the geopolitics sides of this naman. I mean, how are the different, global and regional powers looking at what's happening here in the Philippines, particularly today sa panahon na medyo very unsettled ang international dahil dito sa invasion sa sa Ukraine, mounting tensions between the United States and China. No, how do you think the outcome of these elections will play out dito sa scenario ngayon?
Magandang tanong yan. Actually, the same questions have been asked to me by a lot of foreign media. There's really so much negativity, I have to say. And I've always said, you know, economy-wise, I don't really see anything much different. Neoliberal policies naman tayo through and through. No? May mga differences, variances here and there, but it's still generally the same. So it will all boil down to the management of finances of the country. Now, as far as geopolitics is concerned, as far as foreign relations is concerned, you know, there's a pivot, no, that the current administration has already done. But let me say that I don't share the sentiment that it's pro-China. If at all, it opened the country to options. No? It's like telling the whole world, hey, hindi lang kami kaibigan ng US, pwede kaming kaibigan ng lahat. And this has translated to, you know, gains as far as military equipment is concerned. We've managed to get some from Israel, South Korea, even Russia, for that matter. No? So let's see how this will be built on, if it will be built on, or it will go really radically towards China, as so some would like to think. No? But again, any Philippine president, to my mind, cannot just ignore the U.S. Whether we like it or not, you know, trade-wise, economy-wise, significant pa din sila, hindi lang military ang contribution ng U.S. dyan. So you really have to be a smart player internationally, no, to really, you know, gain enough, no, from the what's this, the political equation.
Your take on this, Ed?
You know, the American interest is both political and also economic. For business investors, whether you're American or any other foreign investors, there are only two things that they're looking for. Predictability and a level playing field. If your rules are not predictable, if you're going to favor cronies, and you're not leveling the playing field, then that puts a lot of question on the economic appetite of the foreign investors. And that's very particular about predictability and level playing field. In so far as the geopolitics is concerned, I think Bongbong Marcos has already enunciated some of his seminal foreign policy initiatives. For instance, he believes, for instance, that we need to deal with China. I'm not sure if it's on a multilateral or in a bilateral, which the Aquino administration never took, because it's a disadvantage to deal with China on a bilateral, relationship. He also mentioned about his first response to Ukraine was more of isolationist, and he was corrected and said we commiserate with Ukraine and whatever. But by and large, you're looking at the relationship between China and the United States. So the United States will be looking at, is this guy going to be like President Duterte, which angles skews more towards China, or will he be friendly to us as well? So those are the concerns that that Americans will be concerned with. The Japanese will follow the take of the United States. They'll try to carve out their own, in the same way that Abe went to Davao to visit Duterte, trying to carve his own influence on President Marcos.
Take the Hague ruling as a measure of that approach to China. What do you see?
I think he should recognize the...
No, he should. That's what you think he should. What do you think he will do?
You know, he will take an approach of... You know, one thing that we learned from Duterte's relationship with Xi Jinping was that you try to appease them, they try to look down on you. Will he follow the same thing again? Obviously, by appeasing to China, it doesn't add any benefit to you. I mean, you're further looked down by the Chinese mandarins. So you need to play both ways. You be tough as well as to be diplomatic. But as to what it is, you can take the multilateral approach so that you have the community of nations supporting your cause. But you know, it's a chemistry how you blend it. That's up to the foreign policy team of this new president. Our DFA is, by the way, very, very professional. So they know how to deal with it. It's up to the new SFA to deal with Marcos and come up with a foreign policy acceptable to our country to protect our country's interests.
Okay. Can we go back internally, that this time on the economic front? Because, these elections may be a case of be careful of what you wish for. Now, you will be inheriting a situation where the country is now, whoever becomes president, 12+ trillion pesos in debt. Now, if you relate that to the experience of Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s father, when Ferdinand Marcos Sr. first came into power, he had 600 million, the country had $600 million of debt, okay? Fairly okay. The son will not be facing a similar situation. This one's going to be tough, significantly tougher, coming from a COVID situation. So how do you look at that? What can you do in a situation where your economic options are limited compared to, let's say, the past?
When I was in, let me just say,
when
we were in government and we recognized the fact that if you don't interfere in the economy, because of the economic activity that we have in our country, easily we can produce 5% GDP. A good president can increase it further to 7 to 9%.
Okay.
So, but at the basic level, we can be assured of a 5% GDP. Wag lang corrupt, wag lang manggugulo, don't
sheer consumption, ganun ba? Malaki, after all, we have a large population.
Correct. You have consumption spending, infrastructure, yun na. But easily you'll have 5% GDP.
Okay.
So, you want to increase your GDP, then dapat tumulong si Bongbong na palakihin. That's why it's important you have an economic management team who recognizes that. Look at Sonny Dominguez. He built on the Aquino administration and also added some further initiatives, reform initiatives as well. So that's the role of the economic managers. Okay. I don't see Bongbong. Our fear is he's going to be corrupt. He's going to protect his cronies, as what Roby was saying. But that's a challenge for him.
Okay.
Well, in the first place, he's not starting from scratch. No? Meron kasing track record na panggagalingan. So, as far as protecting cronies is concerned and so on, I'm sure, of course, that he will be very circumspect with how he's going to move in that regard. Now, as far as the debt is concerned, that has always been mentioned. No, but economists would always tell you, teka muna, yung debt to GDP ratio manageable na. We're like what? At 56% the last time I checked it with the numbers. No? So, in other words, it's still manageable. No? Now, how that increases later, no? In terms of percentage, it has to be justified in terms of which industries would it be spent, no? Kasi may mga nabanggit naman na ng mga priority areas, no? Like what's this, agriculture, no? Fisheries and so on. That it seems like, I think, no, what resonated to me as far as economic strategy is concerned, no, is to focus on food security. No? So kung doon pupunta yung pera and it will create jobs, no, and somehow, no, include the local economic development, then that will translate into something really significant. Kasi ang growth areas mo naman is the usual suspect pa din no? So why not tap on other areas that has remained, so to speak, sleeping, no? Or unproductive.
Okay. Okay. Roby, I think
nag-update lang tayo ng numbers. Jess, you have the latest numbers for us?
Well, it's still pretty much the same picture here, Robbie. Like what you mentioned, 11:29 p.m. As of 11:29 p.m. Bongbong Marcos obviously still in the lead here with 25 million votes. Leni Robredo with 11.9. Let's check in on the vice presidential race here. Pretty much the same number of votes here really for Bongbong Marcos and Sara Duterte. Sara Duterte so far has 24.9 million compared to Kiko Pangilinan with 7.4 and Tito Soto also with 6.7 million votes for the senatorial senators. Let's try to check in on this one first. You have Robin Padilla with 20 million votes, still top of the pack here. Lauren Legarda also with 19.6 million votes. Rafi Tulfo with 18.8, Win Gatchalian at 16.7 million. The fifth spot here, Chis Escudero at 16.5 million votes. And wrapping of our top six here, you have Mark Villar with 15.6 million votes.
Just looks like we have on the phone right now incumbent Marikina Mayor Marcy Chodoro, who is set to win his re-election bid. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Mayor.
Hi, Roby. Good evening. Yes.
Good evening po. Kasama po natin si Gretchen.
Good evening, Mayor.
Gretchen, magandang gabi rin.
Opo. Kamusta naman po tayo at yung ating pagtanggap sa mga resulta? And looks like you are set more than 140,000 votes lead so far versus former Mayor Bayani Fernando. Did you expect this?
Hindi naman, pero nagpapasalamat talaga ako dahil nakita natin yung pagtitiwala ng mga tao. It's overwhelming on my part, and I am honored by this number of votes.
Mayor, I think for all LGUs and even for the national government officials, it's very crucial now. A lot of people have talked about continuity, but especially in the context of emerging from COVID and trying to jumpstart economies both on the national and local level. Talk to us about how vital it is that you get to continue your programs.
The real challenge at our level is the post-COVID recovery plan. How sustainable and how can we effectively implement such plan in this context that we are continuously trying to improve our condition. Healthcare system, we need to have a very sustainable healthcare system, resilient, and more importantly, yung economic recovery plan natin, generation of jobs on our part. How to keep our community safe from COVID.
Okay. Mayor Marcy Chodoro, maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Roby. Yes, Gretchen, maraming salamat. At sa ating lahat, magandang gabi po.
Joining us now over the phone is Sorsogon Governor Chis Escudero, who is well within the Magic 12 of the Senatorial race. Good evening, Senator Chis.
Senator Chis?
Sino yun? Si Hart ba yun?
Senator Chis?
Good evening po.
Sige, balikan natin, Senator Chis. We'll take this opportunity as well to acknowledge Mr. Edwin Lacheda, I understand, has to run. It's obviously a very hectic evening, but I'll ask your final word. I'll also prompt you with, we now have 77% of the precincts. If we're doing the math right, this adds to about 40 million, let's say 41 million of the votes in. Marcos with a strong lead. That's about 63% of what we're expecting. 62% of what we're expecting in that final tally. Your sentiments, this is clearly a trend. Should we call it more than a trend? We've heard Bongbong Marcos with this message of gratitude, although he does say, he's the first to say, we will wait for everything to count. But your final takeaway for this evening.
Like I said, he's already at 25 million. He's short of. He's currently at 38.12% already of the total votes cast. So to hit 39, you only need about
a few
500,000 votes, 500 plus thousand votes left. And by the looks of it, it seems like, and Lenny's votes, she's only currently at 18.15% at 11 million. So I think, and you have a total votes counted already at 64.20%. So you only have a remaining 35.8% to be counted. So it seems like it's very difficult for the votes to look for votes And it seems like Bongbong's numbers are going up, and we're trying to look for votes. Depends on where the regions are to get the votes for Lenny. But it seems like we're heading towards a
Marcos presidency.
Marcos presidency.
That said, what do we expect from a Marcos presidency?
Well, we expect him to live up to what he promised. That he will be a unity president, that he will bring progress to the country with his classic pinwheel. So that's something that he should live up to those promises, and he will be held to account if he fails to do that.
What do you think will he focus on? I mean, if the hallmark, of the Duterte administration has been the war on drugs, the build, what do you think will the Marcos administration be known for?
I think the most immediate concern would be the economic recovery, the public debt. That's the first thing that he will handle, and forming his own cabinet first.
Alright, balikan po natin. Joining us now over Zoom is Sorsogon Governor Cheese Escudero, who is well within the Magic 12. As we've said of the senatorial race, he is at number 5 so far. Magandang gabi po, Senator Cheese.
Ate na pala si Senator Cheese nasa
Ito
likod
na nga.
mo.
Sir, nakamute po silang
Good evening, Governor, Senator Cheese. Senator.
Mukhang chill lang siya. Chill.
Senator, can you hear us? Nako, baka hindi tayo naririnig ni Senator. Okay.
Cool na.
Tawagin lang. Hi, Senator Cheese, can you hear us?
Yes, Robbie, I can hear you.
Okay, you're with us. You're on the screen with us. Starting now.
Yes, Robbie.
Okay. Well, Senator, congratulations na ba? It looks like you're headed back to the Senate.
Hindi ko pa alam, Robbie, mahirap pag siguro, pero nagpapasalamat ako sa resulta so far. Pero sa dulo, boto pa rin sa araw ng eleksyon ng bibilang ang ikakonsidera ng lahat.
Okay.
Kamusta naman ang kampanya po ninyo? How has it been the past, 7, 6 months of the campaign?
Okay naman, nakakapagod, pero hindi tulad ng ibang kandidato. Gobernador ako nung lalabigin ng Sorsogon, so hindi ko kailangan mawala ng matagal dito. Kung hindi, gagabundok ang kailangan kong pirmahang papeles pag nawala ako ng matagal. So napapasana all na lamang ako sa araw-araw na nakakapagkampanya. Dito nagdaang panahon.
Senator Cheese, kasama po natin dito si Mon Isberto, si Edmond Tayo, pero tsaka si Jester De Los Santos. Pero I do also wanna say, kasama namin kanina lang si Edwin Lacerda.
Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Karang-aral ko makapiling kayo sa gabing ito.
And obviously, mahaba-haba ang usapan tungkol sa unity na plataforma at pangako ni mukhang magiging Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And you know that comes with a lot of history. You know that comes for a lot of people with a lot of irony as well. Hindi naman po kaila sa inyo ang hidwaan sa ating lipunan, ang mga totoong away at totoong kahirapan din to achieve unity. Ano po ang papel ng Senado sa tingin nyo dito sa usapin ng unity?
Well, una sa lahat, hayaan mo sabihin ko, Robbie, na sa isang demokrasya, sinusunod natin ang boses ng nakararami. Pwedeng sang-ayon tayo doon, pwedeng tingin natin tama o mali man yun, pero dapat kilalanin, respetuhin, at tanggapin natin na yun. Walang humahawak na monopolya na magandang intensyon para sa ating bansa, lalo na sa isang demokrasya. Yan ang pinagkaiba ng demokrasya sa diktadurya. Walang sino mang isang tao, isang grupo na pwede magsabi ko na maganda, tama at para sa ating bansa. Sana matutunan natin yan bilang isang batang demokrasya pa. Papel ng Senado kaugnay sa bagong administrasyon, kung mananalo nga si dating Senador BBM, ay tiyakin na mabigyan ng pagkakataon ng sino mang makakatanggap ng mandato para magawa ang kanyang sinasabing gawin nung siya'y nangangampanya at hindi harangin dahil lamang ibang binoto natin sa nagdaang halalan. Para sa akin, Robbie, ano man ang kulay na dinadala natin nitong nagdaang eleksyon, pink man, blue man, yellow man, o green man, o red man, sana pagkatapos ng eleksyon, pare-pareho na ang kulay natin dinadala. Mga kulay na sumasagisag na lamang sa bandila ng ating bansa. Pula, puti, asul na may konting dilaw. Dahil sa dulo, pare-pareho tayong Pilipino. pare-pareho tayong nakasakay sa nag-iisang bangka na ang tawag ay Pilipinas.
Pero Senator Cheese, isang tanong na lang. Kanina, meron kami nilalaro kaming parlor game dito. Kinakarambola namin kayo, pinuhulaan namin. Napag-usapan niyo po ang papel ng ating mga institusyon pagdating sa usapin ng unity, pagkakaisa. Pero kayo mismo, as an individual member of the Senate, ano po ang papel na gagampanan ninyo? Kung mamarapatin niyo lang, administrasyon, oposisyon, gumigitna, ano po ang nakikita niyo pong gagampanan?
Hindi ko pa alam, Roby, dahil wala ako in-endorsong kandidato sa pagka-presidente. Ako, nag-iisang gobernador na tumakbo sa pagkasenador at ang naging posisyon ko, bigyang laya ang aming mga kababayan na makapili kung sino nais nilang iboto nang walang pressure mula kanino man, lalo na sa kanilang gobernador. Sa akin, hindi ako tumakbo para kampihan na naman ang kulay. Tumakbo ko para pagsilbihan. Ang kulay na pula, asul, puti na may konting dilaw, tumakbo ko para pagsilbihan ng sambayanan. Hindi nag-iisang kandidato o hindi nag-iisang kulay lamang.
Okay, Governor and Senator Cheese Escudero. Maraming salamat po. Magandang gabi po sa inyo. We also have some updates still with the count. And we understand that, again, kani-kanina lang po, the front-runner, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. delivered a message via a 5-minute speech on his Facebook page. If you did not catch it earlier, let's listen in again. But before that, let's get some updates from Jacob Lazaro, who is also now covering the Robredo campaign. He is in the Robredo headquarters in Pasay City. Jacob, kamusta dyan?
Hi, Robbie. Hi, Gretchen. And right now, actually, earlier, well, let's start earlier, when the votes started to come in, the partial, unofficial, I'm hearing myself echo a little. When a partial unofficial counting began to come in, the campaign people here had their eyes glued to the screen, watching as when there was still like 500,000 gap between Marcos and Robredo. During that point, they still had hope. Maybe she would be able to catch up. Then it became 1 million, 7 million, and when it surpassed 10 million, nobody even bothered to look at the screen anymore. During that point, I think many of the people here were resigned to the fact that it was not really a win for them. And for a good hour, really, there was not really silence, but quietness. You could hear people whisper, some were crying, and a lot of the young people who were volunteering here, they felt bad about the future. That's what they said, of the future of their country, because their bet lost, and the one that they didn't really like was the one that won. But then after that hour, we suddenly heard on the other side, because we're in the media side, and then there's the camp side where the lawyers for Lenny and everyone else. We heard from the media side that they were playing Rosas, of the Lenny camp. And then after that, they played Liwanag sa Dilim, and then you could almost hear them partying as if it was a victory for the Lenny and for Lenny and Kiko. So during that point, I think they had accepted the results. And to be fair, I think this is something that they saw in advance. But instead of wallowing in their sadness, they chose to, pat each other on the back for all of their hard work. And as Robredo said earlier, she's happy and she's at peace, not necessarily because she won or she knows she will win or she will lose, but because she's happy to have been able to run. And as she said earlier, what they achieved in this campaign, the volunteerism, the people's campaign that they call, achieved way more than they expected. So I think her supporters, her people here in the headquarters had the same sentiments. Robbie, Gretchen?
Jacob, meron din bang mga pumupunta dyan na supporters? Because we're seeing on the other camp of Ferdinand Marcos Jr., we have supporters coming over to his headquarters. Dyan din ba? Meron bang mga pumupunta na no, para sabayan, damayan itong kampo ni VP Lenny?
Wala naman, walang ganung klaseng support na dumating dito. Hindi rin kasi siya hindi rin kasi announced publicly yung headquarters. I think this was only na heads up lang kaming mga media dito sa campaign people. Tsaka wala ka namang makikita malaking big Lenny Tarpaulin headquarters dito. So I don't think people really know that we're here.
Jacob, one quick question lang. Are we expecting a message from Ms. Leni Robredo, Vice President Leni Robredo, this evening?
Actually, Robbie, yun na nga yung hinihintay natin, no? If we're going to get a concession speech or anything else, like what's their plan? Will there be any legal actions given all of the malfunctions of the vote counting machine? That's something that we have yet to have any update. But according from the lawyer, Attorney Romy Macalintal, he himself will not be giving any statement today. And for the whole day of the election day, he's been the one acting as the spokesperson. But he confirmed he will not be giving any speech. As for Robredo herself, we have yet to receive any update if she will be saying anything tonight or tomorrow, or if she will be coming back tomorrow or tonight. So that's something that we are still waiting for.
Okay, maraming salamat, Jacob Lazaro.
In the meantime, we have Marlene Alcaide joining us live again from the BBM headquarters.
Mukhang may problema pa tayo trying to get to Marlene. But mamaya babalikan natin yan because si Marlene is in the headquarters naman ng Marcos campaign. Balikan natin kanina, Professor Tayo. No? Gaya nga ng sabi ni Jacob, you have a lot of people who volunteered for the Lenny campaign. Obviously, they're very emotional.
Yeah.
They're probably taking this heavily, but sinabi niya nga rin, at a certain moment, they also wanted to claim some victory. Could you put, I mean, you're a political scientist, but at the same time, could you put a face and a perspective to what they're feeling, and more importantly, how should they wake up tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, I can only imagine how many feel now, at least as far as those who actually campaigned for the Vice President. Pero maganda yung usapan natin kanina this is not really a loss. And no less than the Vice President herself says that she doesn't see it as a loss really, or having actually lost the election. So, siguro, dapat talagang pag-isipan nilang mabuti how they will take off from this. Kasi malaki yung gain ng organization. No? So, pero, if they will be satisfied with being just a civil society, then it's not going to be institutional just the same. No? So, they might want to push for something lasting.
Kasi dalawa yung binanggit mo kanina. There's a movement.
That's right.
Diba? And that's for the campaign. And then sabi mo nga, yung to institutionalize. And Gretch was asking kanina, how do you institutionalize? And ako, dadagdag ko lang doon, if you're going to have that push to try to capture, as you said, parang, and Edwin was saying that kanina, this has to be captured somehow and crystallized and organized. Is there anybody else who can do it other than Lenny?
Well, if she starts it, I'm sure, of course, that it will not only resonate, people will respond to it, because it's not like the first time that there will be a group of people that will respond to system change. If you remember, when the consultative committee was convened, albeit rather late in 2018. Pag tinignan mo yung composition, it's really a good mix from different political colors. So they responded to the call of system change, even if there were still some doubts as far as President Duterte at that time. No? So let's see how it plays out this time, especially coming, no, from a respected former vice president. No? So apart from that, one concrete narrative that we can build on is that meron na actually political party reform bill that was passed already in the House of Representatives during the time of former Representative and now Senator Sani Angara. No? So it was already being heard in the Senate, no, at that time because it was already passed, no, on third reading in the House of Representatives. But this was during the previous administration. But it would be interesting to ask the question, why is it that it was already on second reading apparently in the Senate, that suddenly the ongoing public hearing was cut short, no, by a phone call apparently, and that the presentation suddenly stopped, and then the Committee on Environment took over. No, so that's the story in the Senate. Now, whether that story is true or not, no, it's not something like we will be starting from scratch. No, ideally, of course, we'd like to review the 1987 Constitution entirely and understand fully well why important provisions, starting with the anti-political dynasty law, is simply not moving at all. No, and realize this time around that it's the provisions on mechanism which is lacking.
Okay. Jess, we're nearing midnight. Tapos gumalaw yata ulit. We're now at nearly 80% transmittal rate.
Let me double check that first, just to be sure. Again, we're already at 80.4% transmission here. Again, of course, like what Sir Lasherda was clarifying earlier, we're talking about the number of percents here. So 80% of the percents across the country have already transmitted their votes so far. And looking at our presidential race here, not much has changed here. We have Ferdinand Marcos Jr. still leading here, way above Leni Robredo with 25.9 million votes. Leni Robredo, on the other hand, has 12.3 million votes. Vice presidential race, a quick check on that one as well using the heat map right here. Okay, majority of the country still in green, of course, bearing Sara Duterte Scholar here with 25.8 million votes. Kiko Pangilinan at 7.7 and Tito Soto at 6.9 million votes for the senatorial list as well. Robin Padilla still leading here. Binoy still at 21.5 million votes. Lauren Legarda at 20.2. Third spot, Idol Rafi Tulfo at 19.5 million votes. Win Gatchalian at number 4 with 17.2 million votes. Chisa Escudero at 17 million votes. And completing in the first 6, Mark Villar with 16.1 million votes. Again, you also have part of the Magic 12 so far. Alan Peter Cayetano, Joel Villanueva, Mig Subiri. And then, of course, this will be the crucial spots here. You have JV Ejercito at number 10 with 13.1 million votes. Risa Ontiveros also with 13 million votes. Jingo Estrada as well, capping off the top 12 so far at 12.4 million votes. Not far behind would be Jojo Binay with 11 million and Herbert Bautista with 10.9 million votes.
So it's still a close race doon sa top, siguro bottom 3 to hanggang mga...
Kaya pa ba yan normally, Sir Tayo?
Yeah, actually yung slot ng 8 to 12 usually nagmo-move pa yan at the last minute. So let's see, like for example, Senator Risa Ontiveros used to be
at number 10.
Yeah, at number 10 and now she's down to 11. So
just we haven't touched on this, but any chance we know what the party list races look
Yeah,
like?
okay, sure, of course. Let's try to check in on the party list here. ACT-CIS first here, 1.8 million votes here for ACT-CIS. You also have here one rider party list ranking second with 890,000 votes. So far, ACT-CIS pa lang yung naka-reach ng 1 million mark in terms of votes here for the party list system. You also have here Tinggog with 712,000. Ako Bicol at number 4. There's also Sagip. There's 4Ps. Also, with at least 500,000 votes, we have Tutok to win. And then there's also Uswag Ilonggo at the number 8 spot. Ang Probinsyano at 571,000 votes. is at number 9. Si Bac also with 546. There's also Agimat with 521,000. And then capping of the top 12 so far, at least for the party list system, is Senior Citizens Party
Jess,
list.
sandali lang, mabilis lang.
Ito, at kampo ni VP Lenny, Gerard de la Peña is joining us live from Naga City. Gerard, anong nangyayari dyan ngayon?
Gerard?
Well, Gretchen, a group of residents and supporters of Vice President Leni Robredo has gathered here at the Plaza 15 Martires here in Naga City. And right now, they've actually started leaving the premises. And I think they're conducting some sort of a procession. But we're not yet aware as to which parts of Naga they are going to walk around. But a while ago, there are some singing and praying here. I think they prayed the rosary a while ago, and they are singing a lot of songs, especially those that are associated with the campaign of Vice President Leni Robredo. And we've seen also that some of the participants in this rally are emotional a while ago. We tried to speak to one of the organizers here, but they refused to be interviewed, and they just said that the main message here is that they are still holding on to the truth, and that is in relation to the ongoing counting of votes. Wherein VP Leni is trailing second to former Senator Bongbong Marcos. So they are still trying to process things. They are still hoping for a miracle that things will change. And right now, there are still some participants here who are left here, but just a while ago, this place is packed with supporters of the Vice President. Gretchen.
Gerard, have you gotten any reports on if there are contentious places, and ano ba yung plano ng legal team ni VP Leni? Are they going to, look into some of the reports earlier or through the day? Meron ba tayong mga ganun na tinitignan?
Well, we haven't spoken to VP Leni after the counting of the votes has begun, and we're also trying to get a statement from Attorney Barry Gutierrez, the spokesperson of VP Leni. But looks like they're not going to issue any statements tonight. But regarding the irregularities and inconsistencies regarding today's election, VP Leni said after she cast her vote in Magarao town here in Camarines Sur that she's quite alarmed, she's quite worried with the way things are going right now, especially that a lot of voters are disenfranchised, and considering that a lot of machines, vote counting machines are not working properly. So we still have yet to hear from them as to the next steps that they're going to take, or if there's going to be a concession, or we don't know yet at this point. Gretchen.
Maraming salamat. Gerard de la Peña reporting to us live from Naga.
Okay. So, Jess, tuloy lang natin yung recap. Ano pang mga inaano natin?
Okay, again, like what mentioned earlier, no? Interesting nga, Roby, na mention mo kanina sa party list system. Still, you have ACT-CIS here, the top spot with 1.8 million votes. Balikan lang natin yung heat map natin kanina, wherein we can see at least yung comparison between 2016 and 2022. Still pretty much the same narrative that we've been carrying all throughout the broadcast here. Again, you have Vice President Leni Robredo still securing, of course, the Bicol region here, as well as certain parts of Samar, or later rather, Samar, particularly northern Samar and eastern Samar, as well as certain parts here of western Visayas, particularly in the Panay Islands. I mean, you have her at least leading in Negros Occidental, the likes of Capiz, Iloilo, Antique, and Aklan as well. Again, you have a number of provinces already flipping here for Ferdinand Marcos. The likes of Tarlac, previously of course won by Robredo, is now voting for Marcos, as you can see right here in Tarlac, with Marcos 372,000 votes compared to Robredo's 251,000. A number of areas as well, of course, vote reach Cebu is now for Bongbong Marcos with 1.2 2 million votes compared to Robredo's 479,000 votes. Also, other areas that we have to take into account here, Negros Oriental, as you can see right here. In fact, Leni Robredo in Negros Oriental is only at third spot with 123,000. Manny Pacquiao already surpassing her numbers here at 125,000. Bongbong Marcos, of course, still in the top spot here in Negros Oriental at 178,000 votes. Mindanao, pretty much, of course, a Bongbong Marcos area so far. Gretch, Roby?
Yes, looks like we have about 80.39% of the results now, transmittal rate. And we're looking at 25.9 million now for the front runner, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., 12 million for Vice President Leni Robredo. And we will stay updated with that as we go through our election coverage. But, I'd just like to ask, moving forward, if we are, going to follow this trend that we have been talking about all night. Duterte has enjoyed, I think, high approval rating throughout the 6 years in the administration. Do you think, that Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will also enjoy the same thing? I mean, we're talking about uniteam, Bongbong Marcos, Sara Duterte joining forces to win this election. I mean, heading towards the direction. But after the elections, it's a different story. Yung Duterte, nakuha niya yung mga areas sa Mindanao because of Sara Duterte, presumably. What would be his first order of business? I mean, what do you think should it be, given how hot and intense this campaign season has been?
Well, I can only speculate, no, if I were to advise the would-be president, or if I was, I am the president, then I would really stick to my guns and promote the Uniteam campaign that I've been explaining all throughout, no. So, yun na nga, starting with the composition of the cabinet, starting with the laying out of the plans, no. So siguro doon dapat mag-start. As to whether or not he will enjoy the same approval rating as the sitting president, it's really difficult to speculate. We've seen so many different presidents that started rather weak in terms of following, like former President Fidel Ramos. No, he was elected only with 23% of the total votes cast. No, only to be very popular at the end of his term of office. No? But of course, that was not enough to propel his anointed successor, no, former Speaker Jose de Venecia. We've seen a very popular president, no, at first, no, former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, only to leave Malacanang with a negative popular rating. No? So, ganun may mga ano kasi yan siso yan no? Like even former President Noynoy Aquino, for a while, he was really enjoying more than 60-70% approval rating. But when Mamasapano happened, yun na, that spelled the disaster already.
We're nearing we're at the tail end of our shift here, although tuloy-tuloy lang po ang coverage at analysis natin dito. Somebody that we actually haven't touched on at all, Senator Ping Lacson. And after everything is said and done, what do you see for him after these elections?
Well, that's a pretty good question. No, he's made the name, no, in exposing a lot of irregularities, and of all the presidential candidates, he's one really who started, putting out in the open, no, his concrete proposals for reform, starting with also strengthening budget. Not only at the national but even at the local level, no? Short of introducing amendments to the Constitution. Pero yun na nga doon sa campaign nagkaroon ng limitations. The way I understood the campaign is that he relied pretty much with the the old machinery that he had. No, if he could have built on this old machinery, not to mention, of course, that it turns out the arrangement or the partnership with the former House Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez was based on very weak foundations. So doon nagkaroon ng limitations, I think.
Okay.
Partner, bago tayo mag-end ng shift natin, balikan muna natin si Marlene Alcaide who joins us live from the BBM headquarters in Mandaluyong. Marlene, ano nang nangyayari dyan ngayon? Babalikan natin muli.
Babalikan natin. Talagang pinasasabik tayo eh. Pero sige, one final recap from Jester where we stand right now. 80% of the VCM machines having transmitted.
Yes. Okay, just to be sure, reset lang natin one final time here. 80.4% of the persons have already transmitted their votes.
Wow.
And again, looking at our presidential race, still the same scenario here. Bongbong Marcos up ahead, 25.9 million votes. Leni Robredo far behind at 12.3 million votes. A vice presidential race again, still that would show Sara Duterte more or less sealing the deal here for the race with 25.8 million votes. Kiko Pangilinan at 7.7 and then Tito Soto with 6.9 million votes.
Sige, with that, balikan ulit natin. Marlene Alcaide joining us live from the BBM headquarters in Mandaluyong City. Marlene, kamusta dyan?
Roby, padami ng padami yung mga taga-suporta na dumarating dito ngayon sa labas ng headquarters ni Bongbong Marcos dito sa Mandaluyong. Kung makikita nyo nga ay nagkakasiyahan na yung mga supporters na nandito, no? Alam mo, nagsimula sila nga dumating dito nung lumalabas na, unti-unting lumalabas yung official na tally dito sa presidential o dito sa 2022 elections. At sa ngayon nga ay nandito, nagtipon-tipon na sila. At kanina lamang ay lumabas at nagpasalamat ang tagapagsalita ni Marcos na si Attorney Vic Rodriguez. Bagaman kanina nagsalita rin si Bongbong Marcos, nagpasalamat siya sa mga bumoto sa kanya at sa mga nakasama niya sa 6 na buwang kampanya na naniniwala raw sa kanilang mensahe ng pagkakaisa. Sinabi pa ni Marcos, alam niyang hindi pa tapos ang bilangan pero hindi raw makapagtitay ang kanyang pasasalamat. Dapat rin daw antayin sana yung pakiusap niya sa kanyang mga taga-supporters na antayin muna na mag-100%, 100% yung mabilang ng mga boto. Pero kung makita niyo naman dito sa labas ng headquarters ay talagang pupunta na yung mga taga-supporters at nagkakaroon na sila ng pagdiriwang dito. Dapat rin si Marcos ay nung kampanya ay paulit niya sinasabi na ilan sa kanyang mga gustong mangyari ay mabigyan ng trabaho, maayos ang agrikultura, yung ilan lamang sa kanyang mga ipinangako nitong kampanya.
Maraming salamat, Marlene Alcaide. We're seeing a victory party now. Sa EDSA lang yan. Malapit lang sa atin yan. Oo.
Wala, hindi mo na maaawat. And I think kanina, even Edwin Rasheda was acknowledging na with, I think, about 66% of the votes. We're not just talking about the transmittal rate now. Talaga naman kanina pa malinaw and kanina report din ni Jacob Lazaro doon naman sa side ng camp ni Leni Robredo. Much earlier on, nasa 8 million pa lang, everybody could already sense that this was an irreversible wave and trend, and it looks like we will wake up, in fact, to a Ferdinand Marcos Jr. as President-elect of the Republic of the Philippines, and that looks like we will continue to cover, however, because apart from Marcos as President and even mas sureball pa, Sara Duterte as Vice President, we are also keeping track of the race for the Senate. Gaya nga ng sinabi ni Professor Tayaw, mga 9 to 13, pwede pa maglaro yan. So binabantayan pa rin po natin yan. In the meantime, we'd like to thank, of course, partner, Gretchen Ho, Jester, and
Game 2. Game 2.
Oo nga pala.
Okay, bukas na bukas. Ibang laban yon. Professor Edmond Tayo, and of course, Mon Isberto, the Dean. Hindi, maraming maligayang pagbalik sa balita. Of course, Mon Isberto, an honor and a privilege Please stay tuned. Tuloy-tuloy po ang ating coverage here on One News as we continue to cover the 2022 national poll elections. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
At ako naman si Gretchen Ho. We will give you the latest breakdown of votes and a deep dive on those figures. Please stay with us. This is Bilang Pilipino 2022 and we are One News.